my toes are busted. My kitchen says my bread is molded. I got a good job at the dollar store.
She used to be an actress.
Oh, really? She do anything out of scene?
And I think her biggest deal was she starred in a pilot.
Pilot? What's a pilot?
So you know the shows on TV?
I don't watch TV.
Yeah, but you are aware that there's an invention called television, and on this invention they show shows, right?
Yeah.
Well, the way they pick TV shows is they make one show. That show's called a pilot. Then they show that one show to the people who pick shows. And on the strength of that one show, they decide if they want to make more shows. Some get chosen and become television programs. Some don't. Become nothing. She started one of the ones that became nothing.
I've seen better days. I've seen better days. I've been scarred on many ways. I've seen better days.
Welcome to Couch Pilots, all of my friends. It's the show that dares to fly into the unknown territory of awful television pilots of the past. My name is Jason, and with me is my main Citizen Vane. It's Captain Philip Restisher. Good evening, I love you.
Good evening, I love you too. Yeah, Citizen Vane. I like that.
Well,
like,
you know
like
what the song was.
In vein or like the vein? Main vein.
Like main vein.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like your penis.
Right.
Oh, I like it.
Because we're idiots. You know that song we played up front? You ever heard that?
I've heard it before.
It's Better Days, and then it's in parentheses, and the bottom drops out, whatever. It's by a band called Citizen King, and today's episode is the Orson Welles Show, and of course he famously made the one of the greatest films of all time, Citizen Kane.
Have you watched it?
I have.
Really? You've seen it all the way through?
Citizen King, Citizen Kane.
Yeah, I got you.
All right. Yeah, I saw it in film class in college.
You know, that's
the kind of douchebag I
took
am.
I took film in college at ICC.
Probably had the same guy.
And I'm wanting to say we talked about. We probably did watch it, but I don't remember.
It was so
long,
weird,
right?
It is long, and it's funny because you go to a school.
Is it down to get the friction on?
God, I love Static X. That's who that is, right?
Yeah.
You go to a college and you pay a hefty fee, and then the guy says, "Hey, watch this movie." It's like, but it's only class is only 50 minutes. We're gonna watch it for the next 3 class periods. Like, how much did I give you? Can I just go to Blockbuster and rent this?
Right.
I don't know. But that's so. Orson Welles is the show for today. The Orson Welles Show. I don't know. I didn't know much about Orson Welles really.
I didn't know him. When somebody says Orson Welles to me, I just think of the movie Nostradamus. I don't know if he's associated with it or not, but I just, for some reason, it's kind of. God,
let's hear it. You got it.
There's a lot of stuff.
Lock and load it.
So, for some reason, I remember when I was little that I saw a movie about Nostradamus, and I swear it was probably like Orson Welles either directed it or he was, played the part. But it was about the same time as the Ozzy Osbourne concert. And I want to say that the reason why I bring that up is because I watched the Ozzy Osbourne documentary on Hulu the other day.
Oh, a new Ozzy thing that came out.
It was like the Ozzy's 9 Lives or something like that. Yeah. And I watched it, and they were talking about that tour.
The one for which you saw the very scary...
And they showed like the set and the castle thing. And it
took you back.
It did. But
around that same time period, they also had Nostradamus, which, honestly, if presented a certain way and to a child, is maybe equally spooky.
Oh, yeah. And I think, those two had to have been around the same
Nostradamus is never like, a great peace is going to come over the land and everyone will flourish. It's always like, there'll be a great drought and then a giant wave will crush humanity. Nostradamus never brings, like, good tidings.
Right. Well, supposedly for 2023, he had predicted the Antichrist and World War III. So right. I was like, oh, that's ironic. How did he know that the first 2 world wars were going to happen?
Did he know it? Did he call it? But he said in 2023?
Mm-hmm.
So this year.
Yeah. Or it was clickbait. I don't know.
Insane.
In the membrane.
I remember...
in the main vein.
Citizen Vane. I remember I used to work at a video store back when it was mainly VHS. That's how old I am. And I remember I worked there during the horrific events of 9/11, and I go in there one day shortly after the incident. I was going to go to work, and my boss, he's like an old kook, and I don't know if he can say kook anymore. I know. I just
think
recently
kook
found out
could.
you can't say I've been gypped because it's short for gypsy, so you can't say gypped.
Eventually, we're not even going to be able to talk to each other.
It's just going to be a series of eye blinks. We're going to communicate solely in American Morse code.
They just want to bring Morse code back. It's
a good code.
Hey, but
It's pretty good code, guys. Pretty good code.
You remember Morris? He wasn't the greatest guy. You guys got to stop that too.
Zach Morris code. Yeah, that's a good code. He could stop time.
The guy who invented Morse code probably pediddled a bunch of kids or
Jesus.
something, and we're gonna have to stop.
We'll
doing
find
that.
out later. Have to tear down his statue.
There's a lot of Morse code
everywhere.
statues.
They're littered across the nation. I went into my work, and the old kook there, he starts mouthing off about Nostradamus and how he predicted 9/11. And I was like, I know, that's probably not right. What you're saying, I doubt that he did that. Whatever. Hey, I want to ask you some questions.
Well, okay.
Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I just you're drinking a Christmas beer.
I am.
That's pretty old.
Yeah, it's way past Christmas. Hey, I got a picture of you the other day, and you're dressed up like Santa Claus.
Yeah.
And I want to hear that story. I purposefully didn't dig into it because I thought all of our listener would want to know what that was about.
Sure. I'm sure they do. So they have the Helping Hands program at the Moose, and every year there's about 7 or 8 families, underprivileged families that we invite them. We serve them dinner. All their children get an abundance of toys and a bike or a scooter, and they get to see Santa Claus and sit with Santa Claus and get a picture taken.
Now, is it largely like single-parent families like me?
No, it's underprivileged families.
Okay. Do people come in there, do they feel shame in that situation?
I didn't notice it from the interactions that I had with them. I think they were very humbled and very appreciative. They didn't seem like, I'm poor and I have to get. It wasn't like
they
that.
didn't feel bad for themselves, or they didn't feel entitled either. They
didn't feel entitled.
They came in right with the right attitude.
You know me. I like to
You would be a mad Santa.
I would be a mad Santa.
You'd be a Billy Bob Thornton bad Santa.
Every one of the parents and the children as well were awesome. So, but the guy that normally plays Santa for the Moose, he was going to be in St. Louis that day, and so he couldn't do it. And somebody's like, "Hey," and of course I was sitting at the bar drunk or something one night, and somebody's like, "Hey, we need somebody to play Santa. You want to do it?" Yeah, I'll do it. Whatever. And then when it came about a week before, I was like, "Oh fuck."
Were you drunk, Santa? Did you get drunk?
No, I did. I did get drunk to do it. I did have a vodka and orange juice while I was in the office waiting after I got dressed, but that was just for the vitamin C. No, but it was really cool. To be honest with you, I was only I only interacted with these kids for maybe 45 minutes. All the families came up and get a picture taken.
Were the kids into it?
Oh, the kids loved it. That was the coolest thing. To be honest with you, that was the coolest part of it. When I came in and was ringing my bell and they were just freaking out, and then when they would come up for a picture, not one of those kids was how they get crying, they don't want to.
Yeah.
None of them were like that, and
none of them pissed on you.
No, and it was funny when I got all done. I was leaving, and they're like, okay, Santa Claus has got to go, and I'm ringing my little bell, and I'm ho ho ho, and I'm walking out, and this little boy, he couldn't have been more than 5.
I want to see my daddy again.
No,
Santa, will you bring back my daddy for me?
No, he waved at me. He goes, "I'll miss you, Santa," and I was like, "Oh my god!" So I hugged him, and then all the kids came over to get hugs with Santa.
Did someone get a picture of that?
I don't know. I don't know. The photographer, she had a whole bunch of, but it was just that was just cool. You know what I mean? I was like, for 45 minutes, I wasn't an asshole. These kids didn't know me. They didn't know how much of a fucking psychopath I am.
Oh, you're not a psychopath.
And and for none of them were like, yeah, that's not fucking asshole. That's not Santa Claus. It was just they were all. It was awesome.
Now I am notoriously a fan of Mike Judge. He made Beavis and Butthead, Office Space.
Yeah.
He also made King of the Hill, which ran for 12, 13 seasons. Ran for a long time. I never saw them all, but I would catch some, and I always enjoyed it. There's a character on the show named Bill. I think he's kind of a chubby slob, bald, tank top.
Yeah. Wasn't he
kind of a dumb guy.
Yeah, kind of a dumb guy.
And one year on the show, he had dressed up like Santa and put all this crazy Christmas stuff in his yard, and the neighborhood kids flocked to it. and they all jumped on his big bounce house, and he gave out candy, and he had reindeers on
And
the
he
roof.
fucked them all.
And he fucked every last one, and the show did not, the camera did not pan away. No, he got such a great feeling out of it that after Christmas, he kept it going. And everyone thought, it was like, oh, that's
It's kind of weird.
pretty bizarre that you're doing that, but he was chasing that feeling.
Sure. No, it was pretty cool.
We'll get into a little bit more later, not too much. But he said, I don't want to talk about personal stuff anymore. You're a man of addictions. Can you see a positive addiction and a continuation of helping people, not necessarily dressed as Santa Claus? No, you're one and done.
No, I was a relief pitcher. If I'm called upon,
Would you do it again?
oh yeah, if I was called upon to do it, yeah. But I'm not gonna,
Not necessarily even Santa. Did you get a charge out of this? Where you're like, you know what? Maybe I'll go. Maybe I'll keep helping families.
No.
I got a 1 day a week,
No.
3 hours.
No.
Okay.
No. It was all for the kids. It was funny. This one lady, she had like 3 kids. And, one kid's in like leg braces, and then
Like Tiny Tim.
yeah, and then she's holding this baby.
The baby as big as me.
And I was thinking to myself, I couldn't even with the beard and everything, I couldn't see anything below my, just
Hell yeah.
And I was like, oh, please don't make me hold this baby. I was just, please don't hand me this baby because I don't know if. And luckily, she didn't hand me the baby.
An underprivileged baby.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you made a difference. I saw the picture. I don't
Except
think,
for the dark eyebrows, I looked pretty good.
Look good.
We probably should have put some flour, cooking flour in
or some powdered sugar.
or powdered sugar or something. We should have done that, but
Baking soda's good. You're right.
but those kids didn't notice. They didn't care.
No, they're dumb. Kids are stupid, man. That's why we can trick them into thinking there's a
Fucking
magic
dummies.
elf.
Yeah, but it was cool.
I knew that Blake Clayton didn't go to an ugly white room and put on a Santa costume, someone snap a picture, and then you take the costume and get in your regular clothes. I knew there was a story there. I wanted to know what it was.
I even had a pillow. I had
Did you? A mic pillow? Did you wear a mic pillow?
No,
under
it
there?
was it was a regular pillow, but I only did one. And I texted my dad the picture, oh, he'll be proud of me, And my dad's like, hey, it looks a little skinny there. I'm like, well, what the fuck do you expect from me? Did the best I could, asshole. You never played Santa Claus for me.
Got to have Michael Clayton back on the show sometime soon. Well, that's a great thing that you did. I'm glad you got enjoyment out of it, and thank you for telling that story. A couple more things I want to ask you about. You got a new puppy.
Foster puppy.
And you've quietly off air asked me to eliminate the puppy, right?
No, this is what I like.
What is enough? You think with the animals?
Oh, it's not. It has nothing to do with me. My parameters were over, months and months and months ago. I have no control or say. I felt like I won because I negotiated from 2 to 1, and I felt like that was a win. I started off with no, and she started off with 2, and I was like no, and she's like 1. I was like, well, what are you gonna do?
But you already have 2 horses in the house.
Sure.
And so you're just going to continuously cycle a third in, right?
I think. Well, we're definitely not doing 2 puppies at a time anymore.
But you'll constantly have a third here.
Not constantly, but yeah, periodically.
You like this puppy. They do bring you joy.
Some of them do.
I feel like you're on an upswing.
Yeah, it's because I haven't spent that much time with this one. I've been sleeping at the pilot's lounge a lot,
no.
And so I don't have to really.
That's on my list, though, not to ask you about personal things.
But no, she's doing good. I mean, considering how bad and frigid the weather has been, she's not just randomly pissing and shitting everywhere. She's knows what a puppy pad is, and then she's eager to go outside. So it's good.
So you're on an upswing. You like the puppy you have. You played Santa, and recently you told me one of your big stresses in your life that you could maybe have some control over is whether or not you continue being in charge of a children's league bowling.
After I had just talked, I said it now. Yeah.
Well, you said these aren't underprivileged. These kids are living in mansions, going every weekend with their fancy bowling shoes they own.
No, not at all. Most of these are little kids.
So you go and you take over the bowling league, and you said it's coming to an end, and you had an opportunity to re-up or not. What happened there?
I said I told the powers that be I will continue to help, but I'm not doing all 3. Mm-hmm. It's too much. So I said I'll take the 2. I'll take the milk and cookie in the youth league. You do the adult youth league because I'm not going to bowl in that anymore. Me and Eli aren't going to bowl in that anymore.
Former guest of the show, Megan.
Yeah.
I think was helping you at one point. Is she involved now or not?
She's the chairman of the youth program.
Oh, so she's in charge of the whole thing.
She's supposed to be in charge of the whole fucking thing. So,
Well, she's not doing a good job.
well, I said,
There's
hey,
a reason that she hasn't been back on the show. I tell you that right.
I was like, hey, I'll help you, but I'm not doing all this. So yeah. So yeah, I love bowling with the kids, like the Milk and Cookie League. They're like 7, 8.
Easy to control.
No, God, no.
Easy
not
to hit.
No, they just the joy of just like throwing it down and like hitting one pin. They're like, this is fucking awesome. I'm like, that would suck.
I'm getting better.
Yeah.
You're having a good time, right?
Yeah, no hot moms. No hot moms. That kind of takes away from it.
That's a bummer, man.
Yeah.
I grew up watching the movie Kingpin. It was a Farrelly Brothers joint with Bill Murray, Randy Quaid, and Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
And the female lead was Vanessa Angel. You remember her?
Oh, yeah.
She starred in the TV version of Weird Science.
Yep.
And I would manually manipulate myself to that show
Sure.
because she was
The main vein?
smoking hot.
Yeah, she was hot.
And that to me, it's like there got to be hot broads at bowling alleys. Not the case.
Not really. Not for the most part. No, but it's fun. I'm trying to give back. I'm trying to get. I want death to come soon, but I'm hoping that like I do enough good things that like I go upstairs instead of downstairs.
You're talking about heaven and hell.
Yeah.
I think
I don't know if I'll ever go back upstairs.
you gotta. I was gonna say I saw a Blake-shaped dent in your couch. All right, that's enough.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captains have turned on the fasten seatbelt sign.
All right, today we discuss the pilot episode of the Orson Welles Show from the year of our Lord 1900, add 79. Great year.
Yeah, 1979. I was 4 years old, so you were -2, I believe.
It was -2, and I was just like, I can't wait 15 years.
Until my mom makes my dad horny and jerk off.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I was thinking that, and I was like, I can't wait till Billy Corgan writes a song about this year.
Oh, there's a Smashing Pumpkins song?
1979, very very famous song. You don't know that one?
Oh, I don't know by name.
Okay, you would know it if you heard it.
Yeah.
It says the word 1979 in it a lot too. Anyway, it was a great year. I was up in heaven, waiting for Blake, waiting to come down from heaven to see Blake.
Okay, that's better. I was like, ugh.
And then I was telling him up there, I was like, he's gonna fuck up a lot, but right at the end, he's gonna do some good stuff, and he wants to come up here again.
Right at the end.
So 1979, let's go back there
In our minds.
And to do so, we'll talk about some things that happened that year so we can get in the proper mind frame of when the Orson Welles Show was made, because to do it any other way would be uncivilized.
Yeah, in 1979, we can't judge this pilot off of today's standards. In 2023,
What do you think we are, assholes?
It's not fair.
It isn't fair. And if we're nothing but fair, that's what we are, you and I.
When it comes to this podcast, yes. In 2023, we got a lot of things that we didn't have in 1979.
Nostradamus.
Nostradamus. We did not have Jason Tosher either.
In what, in 2000? Oh, in
1979.
We didn't have me. Here I am, guys.
And so, there's a life without him, and nobody wants to live that life. We didn't have aluminum cans in 1979 like
Did
we
you
do now.
did you just name the thing that I was picking up and drinking out of?
No.
Are you going to say something else that's on my body now as a third thing?
We didn't have contact lenses in 1979. You wear contact lenses?
Hell yeah.
Do you?
I feel like you should know that about me right now. I know that you live a life of no contact lenses, no glasses, and everything you see is blurry. That would drive me nuts. I wake up in the morning, first thing I do is I put on my glasses. I fart around for like an hour, and then I put my contacts in. And
I touch my butt too much to have contact lenses.
I think all you have to do is wash your hands and put them in. You touch your butt a lot throughout the day, and then touch your eyes?
All the time.
Look, we all get a right in the center of the asshole itch sometimes. Dig at it.
Yours in the center?
Right in the middle. It's that negative space. It's like a phantom itch. Oh yeah. And then you, as soon as that happens, then you go hit the loo, as it were, and you wash up, and then you can touch your eyes.
As
all
the
you
dogs
want.
lick my hand.
You're gonna get pink eye like a motherfucker. Hey, here's some things that did happen in 1979. January 16th, Shah Muhammad Reza Pahlavi flees Iran with his family, relocating to Egypt after a year of turmoil. Seems like a lateral move to me.
Yeah, right. I don't know. My mom is her dream has always been to go to Egypt.
Yeah.
And she keeps looking for somebody to go with her.
Egypt.
But I think she's too much of a health risk to go all the way over there and be with her like in Egypt. But
What about traveling to Egypt and spending time over there? What would be the health risk part of it?
well, I mean, she has COPD. She's overweight.
We don't talk about religion, COPD,
Or her.
or yeah.
And cops. No, I just think that. No, I don't want to be the one to be over there with her.
Well, does she has girlfriends?
No.
She doesn't have she doesn't have friends?
No, she's a lot like me.
Yeah, I can't name one friend that you
She
have.
just hates people. No. Yeah. So I don't know. You go to Iran to Egypt. I mean, I guess. I mean, at least you get to go see the pyramids.
Yeah, I remember when I used to have that thrift store. Like, if you get anything Egyptian in, let my mom know.
Sure.
And then I went to her house one time to like move a mattress or something. I don't remember. Do you remember that?
Uh-uh.
I went to your mom's house with you, and we moved a mattress. And I remember it was like so jammed full of shit. We couldn't open the front door all the way.
Right.
And but there was definitely an Egypt element in the house.
And it's overkill since then.
But your mom should go.
Oh, she should. She even had her late dog Hallie. She and her new dog Paige that she
Mummified?
She found a website that would make a canvas photo of them in Egyptian costumes.
Wow. I will say it is slightly less insane than having it mummified.
Slightly.
I think what they did,
And then she had a blanket made.
Okay.
And then two pillows made with them. The same picture
of the
same
dog?
website. They're like, now we got this. You can get this picture on anything.
A mug. It's always a mug. They put
Eli
things
for
on.
Christmas, he asked for a Gilmore Girls Luke mug, like from.
Oh,
I don't understand what that's all about. I didn't ask him what the.
I found one of those seriously about 3 weeks ago at a thrift store, and I bought it for my daughter because she's named after the main character.
Right, sure.
And I don't know if she uses it, but she accepted it gracefully. But it was a Luke's mug. So,
Yeah.
Eli is gay.
I hope so.
I hope he is too.
I do too.
I hope that kid's fucking gay. Hey, January 9th, the Music for UNICEF concert is held at the United States General Assembly to raise money for UNICEF and promote the Year of the Child. It is broadcast the following day in the United States and around the world, hosted by the Bee Gees. Other performers included Donna Summer, ABBA, Rod Stewart, and Earth, Wind, and Fire. A soundtrack album was later released. Now, you used to go to music festivals.
Sure, that'd be later on. Text me that so I want to look at that soundtrack up. That'd be cool. Rod Stewart, ABBA,
Earth, Wind, and Fire, and the Bee Gees, hosted by the Bee Gees. Yeah. So right there, 1979, we're talking about like the start of the decline of disco.
Disco, right.
And Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yeah.
A little hip-hop in there,
Sure.
a little smooth R&B.
Donna Summers, her name in the phone book is obviously
Donna. Love that. Hey, Sherry O'Terry, grossly underrated.
Oh, I think so too.
I think she's a piece of shit, though. Like, you don't see her anymore because...
Trumper.
I don't know about that. I just think that she's a person that was difficult to work with because, like, a lot of other ladies, like, kind of group together from that show or work with each other. Never Sherry O'Terry. Never. I think she's a piece of shit. Sorry. I liked her.
Sorry, Sherry.
Why'd you stop going to music festivals? You feel like you got too old or too busy?
Too old. Yeah, too old.
I still go to that Riot Fest usually, 1 to 3 days a year with old Dutch Stick Dustin that I work with.
Right. Yeah, well, that's different. Like, you leave and you can go to a hotel. Like, the ones that we were going to, you were leaving and then going and laying in a tent that had been baking in the sun for the whole day.
Earlier this year, I went to a summer camp right here in Chillicothe.
Right.
A lot of people camp there. I would never in my life do that.
No.
I saw camps everywhere. It's just the dirtiest people doing the most drugs and getting the most VD you can imagine.
Did Smashing Pumpkins play 1979?
Hell yeah, they did. They fucking rocked it, baby. I was second row center. I was right there. I could smell Billy
You mean there
Corgan's.
was all those campers there that had been there all day and you somehow got that close?
It was to my advantage because there's like 5-6 stages. So everyone's spread out to all these different things. I got there like, I think about an hour to 45 minutes early, somewhere in there. And I got right to the front, baby.
Cool.
Hell yeah. I was right there.
Cool.
Anyway, January 25th, Pope John Paul II arrives in Mexico City for his first visit to Mexico, mainly for 1979's Latin American Episcopal Conference, also known as CLAM.
Episcopal.
Oh,
It's because
Episcopal?
It's because of that butt itch he had. He had to get the Episcopal done.
There's also known as the Conference of Pueblo.
Pueblo, Colorado, 81009.
Is that where you go to get like you send away for something
Yeah.
there? What is it, like a nice hat?
That was always where you sent. Like when I was growing up, that Pueblo, Colorado, 81009.
It reminds
It
me
was
of
a
it.
mecca.
Like every few years or whatever, they change home offices for David Letterman's top 10 list. There's just a bullshit place like Waterloo, Iowa, or something.
Sure.
Like that. Anyway, Blake, we do make it a point on the show not to talk about religion.
Sure.
But did you grow up? You didn't grow up going to church of any kind, did you?
No. I had a few stints of church time in my late teens and. Yeah, but I didn't. Wasn't raised that way.
Do you know much about religion? Like, because obviously in this country, Catholicism, Christianity is probably the most popular religion.
Sure.
Do you have like any kind of knowledge of the Bible or anything adjacent to Christianity?
I know what you're not supposed to do based off of a story in a book.
Okay.
And I know how Jesus was born in a manger to a Virgin Mary.
Right.
I know there was a snake. There was a snake.
A silly snake.
A silly snake, and Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden naked.
I'm sorry. Did you say Adam and Steve?
I think that's what it really was. And then hellfire and brimstone comes in eternal damnation.
Right.
And the devil, Lucifer, was a angel that fell from heaven, and because he did some bad shit, and then now he's gonna kill everybody.
You know a lot more than I thought you did. Hey,
Thanks.
10 Commandments.
Oh yeah.
Name as many as you can, real quick.
Don't covet thy neighbor's wife.
Okay.
Gluttony.
All right.
I'm trying to think of the movie Seven. Don't rock the jukebox.
Okay.
Always drink your whiskey on ice.
All right. Never neat.
No.
God's rules.
Gay sex is wrong.
Okay.
Says these commandments, not me. I'm just.
That's fine. You got 5.
Felt tip pens are the best to
All right.
use. I got 4 more to go.
Right.
Oh yeah, don't fuck animals. Excuse me. There was another one.
There's an easy one there you're missing. Thou shalt not.
Not kill. Yeah,
Okay.
don't kill anybody.
All right.
Don't kill yourself.
That was the easy one. You got it. Yeah, 2 more, really. Real quick here.
Don't try to fly
All right.
too close to the sun.
Okay. The Kid Icarus
Yeah.
commandment. You got it.
And only drink bottled water.
Boom. Nailed it. I didn't
Thank
think
you.
you would have that. That's incredible.
Thank you. I feel as though that should be part of next year's Chris Tuckley Christmas song.
Maybe.
Oh, by the way,
Some
thank
noise
you,
right at the end there.
thank you, Chris Tuckley, for the Christmas card.
Oh, yeah, I just saw that. It was tremendous. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I don't know about you, but I'm back in 1979.
I'm feeling it.
Why did we choose to watch the Orson Welles show? There are 3 reasons.
3 reasons, the pillars of the show. A, it was a television show that never went to series. Whether it aired or not is irrelevant, but only one was made. Number 2, we had to find that bitch on the internet. And number 3, baby, it had to be free. Thank you. Thank you, Randy.
That's absolutely right. Thank you so much, Blake. Probably ask yourself, where can I find the entire episode of the Orson Welles Show? You can do so by subscribing to Couch Pilots and SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app of choice, and then simply click on one of our classically blue links in our show notes. Or go to archive.org and revel in the free public access of the American Digital Library.
And it drives me nuts when we have to do one from there.
That's what?
It drives me nuts, that website.
Sorry. Sometimes it's the only place to find things.
That's all right. I fixed the problem.
What's that? What's the
Well,
problem?
usually I have to watch it on my phone, which is a pain in the ass. But on Christmas Day, I went to my office at work and I watched it.
Christmas Day, leaving the family house. I'm not going to ask you anything personal. All right, summary of the pilot. The Orson Welles Show was an unsold.
Ooh,
This
boy.
Christmas ale is really.
Christmas pale ale.
Oh my God, it's 45%. Holy shit! It's a Christmas miracle. The Orson Welles Show was an unsold television talk show pilot directed by Orson Welles.
Yeah, imagine that. Who else would direct it?
I don't know, but I'm sure as hell not going to grade it. Interesting facts.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Interesting Facts. This is the part of the show where Jason has scoured the internet to find facts out about this show that you may not know. We just ask that you keep your opinions to yourself, enjoy these facts, and don't share your opinions with anyone else. You may proceed. Supposedly the Pope is like in bad condition, like his health is getting bad, right? So we're pretty soon we're gonna be watching to see what color smoke comes out of the chimney stack.
I know
at the Vatican.
That's like a trivia thing that you have locked and loaded, right? Because I don't think everyone knows that, especially in America. I think in European countries they're more entrenched in their history.
European.
Well, I'm a pooping, right? Continents.
Incontinence.
High five it. Nice. Interesting facts. George Orson Welles was an American actor, director, producer, and screenwriter known for his innovative work in film, radio, and theater. He is considered to be among the greatest and most influential filmmakers of all time. Fact. In 1938, his radio anthology series, The Mercury Theater on the Air, gave Welles the platform to find international fame as the director and narrator of a radio adaptation of H.G. Wells' novel, The War of the Worlds, which caused some listeners to believe that an invasion by extraterrestrial beings was in fact occurring.
Where do you think we could find that? Could you find that someplace
Oh,
on the
yeah.
internet, you think?
Oh,
The whole thing from beginning to end?
I think that is a very easy YouTube look.
I think
look up.
I think I need to check that out.
Maybe the rest of this episode we just play that, and then that's it.
Valentine's Day's coming up, but I won't have anything to do.
Ooh, boy, same. Hey, you and me are going out.
Oh, yeah?
Although reports of panic were mostly false and overstated, they rocketed the 23-year-old Wells to notoriety. Fact. And his first film was Citizen Kane.
Wow.
Which is consistently ranked as one of the greatest films ever made, which he co-wrote, produced, directed, and starred in as the title character Charles Foster Kane. The character was an amalgamation of newspaper magnates of the time, most famously William Randolph Hearst. Whose great-granddaughter would end up marrying Chris Hardwick. Fact. That was just for you, though.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
The Orson
Haven't
Welles...
heard from old Chris in a long time, have we?
Chris Hardwick? Yeah, who knows what he's up to? The Orson Welles Show has never been broadcast or released in its entirety. Fact. Filming began in September 1978 at KCOP-TV in Hollywood, and the project was completed around February 1979 at 10-4 Productions in Los Angeles. It ran 74 minutes, and it was intended for a 90-minute commercial time slot. Fact.
Okay.
Wells was less...
Was what?
Yep.
Christmas ale.
Christmas ale in the mix. Woo. Wells was listed in the credits under the pseudonym G.O. Spelvin. George Spelvin, Georgette Spelvin, and Georgina Spelvin are traditional pseudonyms used in programs in American theater. The reasons for the use of an alternate name vary. Actors who do not want to be credited or whose names would otherwise appear twice because they're playing more than one role in a production, or actors who are members of the trade unions but are working under a non-union contract may adopt such a pseudonym. Fact.
That was a long fact.
Boy,
You made it through real good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Shot partly before a live audience, Wells interviewed a variety of celebrities. Audience questions for the guests' Q&A sessions were scripted, with members of the audience given line readings. This was necessary because, unlike normal talk shows filmed with a multiple camera setup, the low-budget show was filmed with only one camera, so it was necessary to do multiple retakes to get multiple camera angles. Fact.
Okay.
The celebrity guest roster reflected Wells' personal tastes. According to his youngest daughter, Beatrice Wells.
Don't call her daughter.
I apologize. I will strike that from the record. Beatrice Wells, who holds the copyright on the pilot. Fact. The Burt Reynolds segment was videotaped using 3 cameras. Jim Henson, Frank Oz has 2 cameras. Chef told Wellsnet, which is something I did not edit out of the fact. That's something taken from something and I didn't edit out of the fact. We used a camera for reshoots. This is someone who worked there. I explained to Orson that the video was 30 frames per second and film 24 frames per second. If you intercut the two formats, it would be noticeable. He said nobody would notice, but I think it looks strange. Some of the inserted footage was used to provide an editing transition where Orson would ask a question to provide a bridge to an unrelated topic. We used a stand-in for a few Burt Reynolds over-the-shoulder shots. All of the magic tricks were single-camera film. Fact.
Wow.
Here's the last one.
Okay.
And I know it's wordy, but this...
You're factoring it up. That's
this
good.
is one hell of a pilot. Several clips from the pilot are included in the 1995 documentary Orson Welles' One-Man Band, which was included with the DVD release of Welles' documentary F for Fake. The clips feature part of Welles' interview with the Muppets and show the format was in the round, with the audience surrounding the panel. One of the clips ends with Welles poking fun at the necessity of having to break for commercials. End of interesting facts.
In the round, that's a new thing. Well, not new, but new I've heard lately. I know Nate Bargatze's new comedy special that's coming out. They say, he filmed it in the round, which is a stage that rotates.
I don't know that that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he might have done that, but in the round, I think just means there was an audience completely surrounding the performer.
Oh, maybe it doesn't. Well, maybe
it does rotate.
Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just a round stage. Okay.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there's a lot of facts there.
That was a lot of... Those were interesting.
Yeah, I would say this. Twitter responses.
Oh, wait. We do it in the Orson Welles.
Thank you.
Today, we are about to go into Twitter responses. Now, some of you may not remember what Twitter was. But in my day, there were responses from an application called Twitter. And upon that application, I contacted people, and they would contact me. And in that digital world, we became one and friends. It's Twitter responses.
Whoa, what a powerful impersonation. I hope that in this upcoming year, you work on your impersonations and nail them.
I think so. I think I will.
We did get a Twitter response. This is a fella goes by the name of Joseph McBride. He was there. He was there at the talk show when it happened. I sent him. I went to Twitter. He's not very active on there, but I go to Twitter, and sometimes there's a link on Twitter, so I click on the link, and on the link it said contact, and I press that, and there's an email. And I sent Joseph McBride an email, and he responded.
What?
And we had this following conversation. Let's go to that right now.
All right. I am very honored to be speaking with today's guest. He's a noted film historian, screenwriter, author, and educator. He has many connections to the subject of today's pilot, including his 2006 book, Whatever Happened to Orson Welles, A Portrait of an Independent Career, which came out with an expanded edition in January of 2022 for the first time in paperback. Also, his two previous books, Orson Welles and Orson Welles, Actor and Director, are both critical studies and currently out of print. He was a key player in one of Orson Welles' final theatrical releases, The Other Side of the Wind, in which he acted in the role of film critic Mr. Pister and was a accredited consultant upon the film's creation. Professor Joseph McBride, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. It's wonderful to talk to you about Welles, and I always say that Welles' career is far from over. Even though he died in 1985, his works keep coming out.
Yeah, I mentioned that The Other Side of the Wind was one of his last theatrical releases. I'm looking through IMDb, which I know is never completely accurate, but in 2020 it looked like there was Hopper Welles with Dennis Hopper in it.
Yeah, when Other Side of the Wind finally came out after 49 years, it was an epic problems to get the film out because of Welles was hampered by finances and legal problems and even political problems with the collapse of the Iranian government, which had helped fund the film. So I and other people, Gary Graver and Peter Bogdanovich and other people have been working for all those years trying to get it out, and we got it out through Netflix, and it's available to the widest audience Welles ever had. I think he would be thrilled, and It was very well put together by Peter and Philip Jan Rimza and Frank Marshall all produced it, and Bob Murawski did a wonderful job of editing it. But there are other Welles films. Hopper Welles has rarely been seen. It's a spin-off from Other Side of the Wind because Welles put a lot of names from current filmmaking in 1970 when he started shooting into the film. And Dennis Hopper, the film is broadly speaking, it's about an old director played by John Huston who comes back from exile in Europe during what's called now the Easy Rider era in Hollywood, when everything was changing and the old guard was being ushered out and the studios were collapsing and the young filmmakers were getting funded, like Dennis Hopper, and his Easy Rider was a phenomenal hit. Low-budget film, made a tremendous amount of money, and the studios were kind of panicking because they didn't understand that kind of film, and so they started throwing money at young filmmakers, hoping that they could make something that would appeal to young audiences, like the studio films weren't appealing to them now back then. And some did and some didn't, and Welles was rather bitter because he was not part of that. They were giving money to untried filmmakers, basically, or people with limited experience, and he was getting shunned precisely because he did have experience, and his reputation, which was partly falsely inflated as a profligate director, which wasn't really true, worked against him. So it's a complex film dealing with that transition, but Hopper Welles, he did an interview with Dennis Hopper that went on for about 3 hours or so. In the fall of 1970, he started shooting Other Side of the Wind in August with me and Bogdanovich. And he was also considering, according to Welles' daughter Beatrice, a whole documentary about Hopper. He was fascinated by Hopper as a phenomenon. And he was kind of like, the Dennis Hopper of 1941 when he made Kane, the young 24-year-old guy who gets to make a film, and he was an actor-director like Hopper, and he was a radical. But it was a somewhat frustrating evening because Hopper was not as outspoken or radical as Welles hoped. He was kind of cautious and not very articulate, and you could sort of tell in the film Welles' interest is waning in Hopper as it goes on. But they edited that into about a 2-hour version that's very interesting to watch, and it's Welles interviewing Hopper for The Other Side of the Wind, and he was going to put the footage in the film. Hopper is supposed to be talking with Jake Hannaford, who's the John Huston character, but Welles hadn't cast Hannaford yet, so Hopper's addressing Welles, who's off screen, and he was going to insert the Huston footage later, but he never did. But sometimes Welles is adopting the persona of Hannaford, who was a right-wing maverick kind of character, but Welles was always a left-wing progressive figure. But sometimes Welles is talking as Welles. It's kind of, I wrote an article for WellsNet, which is a really incomparable fan site for Welles, and fan site is not adequate to describe it because it's really scholarly as well as fan-oriented. It's Ray Kelly puts it out. He's been doing this for quite a while, and it's wellsnet.com. Has pieces on all the new projects. And I always say that Welles' career is not over, even though he died a long time ago. He left a lot of unfinished works and films that were tied up in litigation or copyright problems or one thing or another, and they're coming out. So some of these TV works that you want to talk about today are in the works to come out, and we can talk about those too. I don't know what's going to happen with Hopper Welles. A lot of people want The Other Side of the Wind out on a Criterion edition, which Criterion is interested in doing, but Netflix, who I think deserve a lot of credit for finally putting this film out after everybody else in town passed, basically. Showtime was interested, but it fell through. But Criterion, Netflix really came through and funded it and gave carte blanche to the producers. They didn't interfere with it. Welles fans around the world should have the film on Blu-ray, and then they would put Hopper Welles and various outtakes and things from Other Side of the Wind. There were 96 hours of film shot, and Welles edited 41 minutes of it, and one plan is to put Welles's cut on there, which they use as a template for editing the rest of it, and different versions of different scenes, and then scenes that were cut, etc. And there were 2 documentaries made about it, which you can see on Netflix. They're both very interesting. One is called Love Me When I'm Dead, which is about the efforts to shoot the film and get it released, and it ends basically when Welles died. And then there's one called Final Cut for Orson, 40 Years in the Making, which Netflix doesn't really want you to see, but it's on there. I think you have to look at something called Trailers and Extras. You click on that, and it's a 40-minute documentary about the post-production, really fascinating film. So it picks up the story where it left off, and post-production was amazingly complicated on that film, so anybody who's interested in filmmaking would love to see that. So that's the status of that one, but there are other ones that are remaining to be completed. His longtime Don Quixote project is a major project that should be put together in a good way, and we can talk about all those, but you want to talk about the Orson Welles show, I believe, right?
Eventually, yeah. I mean, you've given me a lot of information there, and a few things that I would like to respond to real quick, if I could. I had read in your article, I think you had mentioned a couple of the projects you just spoke about here in the interview about how he would start projects and not finish them. And I think I had read something that you had also mentioned about the Iranian government or the country funding some of his projects. If he kept starting all these different projects with his own money, why didn't he ever finish any of them with his own money? Was it just money would drop out and he would get interested in something else and his passion would move on to another project?
Well, as I say in Whatever Happened to Orson Welles, each project has its own reasons for not being finished. There's some sweeping theories that purport to explain what Charles Hyam called his fear of completion, which I think is a reductive psychobabble way of looking at it. He really wanted to complete these projects generally, but one insight, Peter Jason, who was an actor and worked on Other Side of the Wind, Welles loved him, and he was kind of an all-around assistant to Welles. He made the point that Welles just loved shooting film, and like when Welles died in 1985, the New York Times obituary said he'd been inactive as a director for the last several years, and they had to correct it because he was shooting film all the time, from 70 to 85, the time he was back in America when I knew him. He'd gotten to the point of being philosophical that if it never came out, that wasn't the main problem, although he desperately wanted The Other Side of the Wind to come out because it was his major work of his later years. Don Quixote, for example, he always stressed that it was kind of a hobby and personal project. He said, I'll finish it when I want to finish it. And he kept tinkering with it, and that was kind of a problem for him commercially because, in the commercial system, they expect the film to be finished within a certain amount of time, and financial pressures build up, et cetera. Now, with The Dreamers, he was shooting what he considered test footage of certain scenes, and then he wanted to attract a sizable budget because it was a period film taking place in Europe with major actors envisioned, and he needed a good budget for that, and nobody was interested because it's very avant-garde. So each project had its own quirky problems. It's not that he didn't want to finish them. One other one that he was not necessarily eager to finish because he enjoyed it so much was Orson Welles' Magic Show. It's basically a TV special doing a whole series of magic tricks, very visually striking. Gary Graver and another cameraman shot the stuff, and it looks beautiful. It doesn't necessarily have a beginning, middle, and end, so that could come out if they would just put it out. I keep saying they should be released in a box set for everybody in the world to see it, because if you live in, say, Iowa, you should be able to see these films, but you can't go to a European archive that easily and see the films, but it keeps getting held up, which is one of the maddening things about Welles. In some ways, ironically, as I point out in my book, that once the artist is dead, it becomes easier in some ways to get the work out because he's not around to argue about it or block it. And he didn't block it just out of willfulness, as some people thought. He did it because he thought editing was the most important part of filmmaking, and so he kept compulsively re-editing his work.
That definitely comes through in the pilot as well for the Orson Welles show. His love of the camera, his love of film, and then the editing. And there's, I think, a lot to be said about the editing in that particular pilot. I did want to ask you, before we get into any further, I had mentioned up top some of the literary works you've been a part of. That's far from the entirety of your anthology. You have other recent works, including Critical Study, Billy Wilder, Dancing on the Edge, Political Truth, the Media, and the Assassination of President Kennedy, and the critical study of the whole darn human comedy, Life According to the Coen Brothers. I think me and probably just about everyone else's favorite current working directors. Your works and biographies and nonfiction have really been unbelievably prolific for the past 50 years. What brings you back to working in these genres?
Well, I wrote 3 biographies, which are huge endeavors because they cost a lot of money and you have to do a lot of traveling. I mean, that's the fun part, is the traveling and the interviewing people. I did biographies of Frank Capra, John Ford, and Steven Spielberg. And frankly, and as I mentioned, I wrote a book about the Capra biography, which is called Frank Capra, The Catastrophe of Success. I had 4 years of legal battle to try to get that out, and I got it out. I won the battle. But I wrote a book called Frankly Unmasking Frank Capra about the attempts to stop or neuter my book by Robert Gottlieb, the famous editor at Knopf, who was my original editor, and he was in cahoots with Janine Basinger, who was Capra's editor, because I came up with so many revelations that were damaging to Capra. They were trying to stop the book, and so I wrote this. I kept meticulous documentation, so I wrote this book about this attempt to stop a book, which I think is one of the worst things anybody could do. And I didn't realize I was writing another book during that 4-year period, which was a terrible Kafkaesque nightmare. But the book came out. But the problem with writing biographies, I wrote a chapter at the end of it, is they're terribly expensive, and I pour my own money into these things. Each time I did one, I went broke. Any money that I had from other projects or savings, tended to go into the books, because you never get enough advance to justify to pay for the kind of research I do, which is exhaustive. And they don't sell as well as they should. There's a limited market for director biographies. They tend to read more books about movie stars, which I've never had a movie star I've been interested enough to write a biography of. So I can't afford it, frankly, to do these biographies. I started a full-time teaching job in 2002 at San Francisco State University, and I enjoy doing that. And when you teach, it gives you the opportunity to write books on the side, and I've been very prolific. My most prolific period was, the last year, from fall of 2021 with the Wilder book through March. I had 4 books out, and they all came to fruition at the same time. Some of them took years to do. Political Truth took a long time to do. I've spent many years researching the Kennedy assassination. I keep doing that. It's kind of my true vocation in life, is the way I think of it. But it's hard to do a biography when you have a full-time job, because you can't really travel around the country or around the world. But I started by writing critical studies back in Wisconsin. When I didn't have access to the filmmakers, I wrote one of Wells when I was in college. I wrote it from 66 to 71, basically, published in 72 by the British Film Institute. And then I did one with Michael Wilmington on John Ford. It's called John Ford. It was published by the British Film Institute, like the Wells book. And we did that from 69 to 71, and that came out in 74. That book is out of print, but we're bringing it back into print. I've added some material from later research into his silent period, and so I've done some new material for that book, and that I think is a very good book. We put a lot of work into it, and I updated Orson Welles in 1996, expanded it by 30,000 words, and I'm going to update it again and get that out. But anyway, so one thing I learned as a young critic, and I didn't realize this when I started writing about Wells in my youth, was when you write a book about somebody, it becomes a lifelong job, because you have to keep studying the subject and adding things about films that come out. And part of the job of a film historian, then we'll talk about these TV shows, is rediscovering things that are lost and helping get them out. I discovered Wells's short film, The Hearts of Age, through a tip from my film professor in Madison, Russell Merritt, and got that out. Wells was not happy. We found that. With Capra, I found 10 World War II films in the National Archives that he had made that nobody knew about. And, I do that routinely, and with Ford, very few of his World War II films were known, and I came up with information about 87 of them, some of which I managed to see, and some I still haven't seen. It may not exist, but he made at least 87 films during World War II for the government. So that's part of the job of a film historian, and I help get the other side of the wind out, et cetera.
Well, it sounds to me, and I might be misspeaking, but it sounds like you're almost a modern-day archaeologist. The way you go back and research these things, bring them to light, study them, and alert the masses of their whereabouts, and just make sure people know these things exist.
Yeah, that was the main focus why I wrote Whatever Happened to Orson Welles, because the reason I write any book usually is because there's some injustice that's being done, or there's a public lack of knowledge, or there's a fraudulent story out there, like Capra's life was fraudulently presented by him in his autobiography, so I told the truth. And with Wells, there were a lot of myths. With John Ford, there was a lot of mystery and myths.
I want to change gears real quickly about some of your work of the past before we really dive into the Orson Welles show proper. I'm someone who still goes to rock and roll shows. I still go to music festivals, maybe once, twice a year. You wrote the screenplay for the 1979 cult favorite Ramones movie, Rock and Roll High School. Were you a Ramones fan? Did you interact with the band a lot?
Well, I was one of the writers. There were 3 screenwriters and 2 guys got story credit. But I wrote 5 drafts of that story, and I was the first writer who took over. Actually, Chuck Griffith wrote a draft that they didn't like for some reason, and I never saw it. And then I put it together, and I came up with the ending of blowing up the school and things like that. And the characters are basically my own. I was always into rock and roll. The second week rock and roll was a thing. My friend Dickie Swearingen back in Wisconsin was into it. We were about 8 years old, and he was a very hip guy, and he bought Rock Around the Clock the first week it came out, and I bought it the second week. And so I was into the early rock, and the Ramones, who are punk rockers, reminded me of the early rock. You know, they have, as Dick Clark said, they have a beat you can dance to, you know, very strong, kind of primitive beat, but their lyrics are extremely sophisticated. I mean, they're almost as good as Cole Porter in some ways. And so I responded to the Ramones, but when I wrote the script, Alan Arkush was the really progenitor of the thing. He's a super rock fan, and he wanted to make his directing debut, and I had written a script about Dick Clark and American Bandstand called Rock City, which was never produced because Dick Clark, Roger Corman unfortunately gave him a copy of it, and he didn't like the satirical view I took of him. And so we would have been ahead of Idolmaker and Hairspray if we had done that. But I was considered an expert on teenagers, which I thought was kind of ironic because I'm usually not a big fan of teenage films. But we were spoofing the teenage rock genre of the 50s. You know, they made exploitation films with rockers but
like Annette Funicello and that sort of thing.
Even before that, you know, they made some films. Roger Corman made a film in the mid-50s about rock and roll, and then the early Elvis films and various things. But we were into the hardcore rock. But Alan Arkush, I said, who is the band? Because a lot of the story revolves around girls bringing a band to their school and causing disruption. And he said, I don't know, because we have to find the right band. And he said, just call it the band. So he found the Ramones through Jane Alsobrook, who was the music producer, alerted him to this wonderful group. And I liked their music right away, but that was added to the film. And the Ramones they were never mainstream because they were too subversive. You know, they had songs about glue sniffing and child abuse, you know, serious subjects, but they were treated in a kind of black humor way. And so radio stations often wouldn't play their work, and but we thought they were great. So they were added to the story, and Alan got a couple of other writers to fiddle with the script. And so it's kind of a group project in a way, and it turned out very well. It's become a cult classic, and Alan did a wonderful job directing it, and everybody contributed different aspects of our talents to it, and it worked out wonderfully. And it became a cult classic. It never never made a profit originally because Roger Corman sort of dumped it on the market like any other drive-in movie, but it needed special handling. And Siskel and Ebert featured it on their show, and Gene Siskel predicted it would be a cult classic, and that he was correct, and that got theaters around the country to show it as a midnight movie, and that clicked on. And so it still plays in theaters occasionally, and it's a very popular film and worked out well.
We touched on already the youth, the Fountain of Youth. We touched on that article a little bit. You had sent me another article from, I believe, 1978 entitled All's Wells, and I found it really packed full of information about Orson Welles at that time in his life. In that article, you mentioned a public seminar that was going to take place called Working with Welles, and it apparently took place in November of '78 in Los Angeles, and you were one of the moderators.
Yeah, we did this wonderful series. The American Film Institute sponsored this. It actually went on for, I think, 2 months, and we did it at the Directors Guild Theater. They were kind of co-sponsors, and it was amazing. We had, I think, 8 sessions, and we had each evening was devoted to a different topic, like Welles on the radio, Welles in the theater, Welles directed by other directors, and then we showed some of his rare stuff that hadn't been finished or seen, and we had a whole thing on the other side of the wind. Welles was kind of reluctant to come. He came twice. He came to the theater one because we had his favorite person in the world, Roger Hill, who was his schoolmaster, who was an elderly guy but very spry and very wonderful man. He was the guy responsible for Welles having his career in theater and everything. You know, he kind of encouraged the young Welles, and so Roger and Welles were there together, and it was just wonderful to watch them together. And Roger was the only guy in the world who could say, "Oh, shut up, Orson," when Welles was going on about stuff. But he just Welles worshipped him, and he put him in the Orson Welles show, the TV show we'll be talking about. So that was going on at that time. He was still struggling to get the other side of the wind out, and he talked about that. He said his backers were hiding in cellars, he said, which is a reasonable place to be because of the Iranian Revolution. You know?
Yeah.
But it worked out eventually.
Well, you know, obviously that article, All's Wells, came out before the seminar. It mentions that in there, and towards the end of that article, you've already answered the question, and I'm happy to hear it, but I was going to ask, it was hoped that Orson would show up for one, if not all, the seminars. I'm glad to hear that he showed up at least for a couple, and you know, one that you got to interact with him some more.
Yeah, we did one on Wells's future, and Wells's comment, he was told about it. He said, "What a witch's Sabbath that will be." I love that comment. Yeah. And he had a bad track record commercially, you know, because, I mean, the basic statement about Welles that I think is the most profound, Jean Renoir, who admired his work, said that Welles was an aristocrat working in a popular medium, and that was his problem. That's a contradiction in terms. And by aristocrat, he meant aesthetic and intellectual. Welles was a progressive politically, but he was making avant-garde films and films that were ahead of their time. He was like Kubrick, who, you know, when you look at Kubrick's films and Wells's films, they didn't usually get good receptions when they came out. Like Eyes Wide Shut, for example, got kind of a bad reception when it came out, Kubrick's last film, but now it's considered one of his best. And the same is true of Barry Lyndon in 2001. And that happened to Welles too. But what was, each guy made 12 films released in his lifetime, and each died at the age of 70. But both of them made films that were totally unlike the previous films they had made, and so the public was kind of thrown by that. They liked to have people fit a niche, and neither of them liked to repeat himself. And so it took about 10 years or more for each of their films to acquire a reputation. But Kubrick, the difference was Kubrick's films made money and Wells's didn't. And Kubrick had the support, therefore, of a major studio, Warner Brothers, very, very supportive, and Welles didn't. So Welles was working on the margins with his great cameraman, Gary Graver, a young fellow who volunteered to work for him and did almost everything Welles did for the next 15 years and made his career possible. Gary is really the hero of that. Tragically, he didn't survive to see the release of Other Side of the Wind. He really devoted his life to that film and died before it came out, but he's the guy who made it possible.
Wow. Well, let's go ahead and shift into specifically The Orson Welles Show. And as we see it on the podcast that me and my co-host Blake do, Couch Pilots, where we specifically talk about TV shows that had one episode, the Orson Welles Show, as far as I'm concerned, definitely fits the bill. You obviously, like we talked about too, have written 3 books on the man dating back to 1972. I want to ask, how did you first meet Orson Welles, and how did he become a reoccurring subject for you?
Yeah, well, when I was at college at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I went there and I was going to become a journalist, which I've been since 1960. My parents were journalists, and also a novelist, I thought. But then I saw Kane at a film class in 1966, Richard Byrne taught, and he was a very exciting professor. And I was so thrilled by that film that I shifted my entire career. It shows you, a film class can change your life.
Wow.
I thought I want to now make films and write about films as well as being a journalist, and but it changed my life, and I wound up, being a screenwriter, but writing film books, film history is my main focus. And so I started this book on Welles because I went out and looked for a book on him, and I couldn't find one that was really good, I felt. So I spent 4 years writing that book in Madison and seeing the films. I had a print of Kane somehow I borrowed from somebody, and I also had a copy of the script, a great script by Herman Mankiewicz, and Welles happened to be at the State Historical Society of Wisconsin in a collection, and I went there and I typed an exact copy of it over a period of a month with my little portable typewriter because I couldn't afford to Xerox it. I was working as a dishwasher. So I had the script, and those were my models, and I taught myself how to write screenplays with that model. Directors have what I call creation myths, usually to show what geniuses they are. They can just walk in off the street and direct a great film. But I found with Capra and other people that's not really true. They usually have an apprenticeship of some kind, and so that changed the picture. And Welles was upset. I mentioned that I discovered the Hearts of Age, 1934 film. He kept telling Graver every 6 months, he said, "Why did Joe have to discover that film?" Because it showed that he wasn't a cinematic virgin as early as 1934 when he was 19. But, Kane is still a remarkable achievement for a 24-year-old guy. And one reason
Absolutely.
I got excited about writing about him was he was only 24 and he was from Wisconsin, which is where I was from. So I thought, wow, if he can do it, I'll try to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes sense why you would look to that and keep at it all these years later. The talk show itself, having viewed it, and we've already recorded the episode for it. The pilot itself, the talk show, had a format unlike any I've ever seen regarding a talk show. He really seemed to be taking some pretty big swings with the idea of what a talk show could be, and clearly it was pretty heavily edited. And some of what Orson would segue with was definitely added in later, pre-written, as was the audience questions. And I guess my question is, for someone who was there like yourself and who knew him, do you know why that it was done this way? What benefit would there be for Orson to approach a talk show like this?
Well, yeah, I was there for one day when he was shooting parts of it in a Hollywood TV studio. And Stanley Sheff, who was the editor, I think said it best. He says, it was not your typical talk show. It's more like a cinematic portrayal of a talk show directed by Orson Welles. What Welles did, he loved to tackle different genres. He was amazingly broad in his reach. He loved radio. He did a tremendous amount of radio shows, theater, recordings, writings, plays. He wrote plays and he made movies and made documentaries. But he never did something the way everybody else did it. Like when he did the trailer for Citizen Kane, he directed it himself, and it's unlike any film trailer. It's kind of like a spoof of film trailers. And he also did a trailer for F for Fake, which is really amazing, which I managed to save from Oblivion. That was a very unusual trailer. So this show started out, he wanted to do, he was trying different ways to become popular. I heard him say once that when he came to Hollywood, he wanted to be the new Charles Dickens, who is the greatest example of a popular artist who was also a great artist, But Welles lacked the popular gene. He was popular on the radio. That was one medium in which he was truly popular, but he never was popular in films or TV because he did things that were so avant-garde, like The Fountain of Youth is a very, very unusual TV show, which is what's great about it. But when he did a talk show, he was going to try to have his own show, and certainly he could have gotten great guests, and he got Burt Reynolds and Angie Dickinson and other people, the Muppets. So this program was, the Orson Welles show was shot like a movie in some ways, but it was kind of a hybrid between, video and film. On this one, he did hours of interview footage with Reynolds, and I actually saw hours of it. The outtakes are all at the Munich Film Museum. They have all the camera footage. There were 3 cameras on Reynolds, and the interview went on for hours. And then he had 2 cameras on the Muppets, I believe. And then he shot some of it on motion picture film, which Stanley Sheff, the editor, said makes it look kind of weird because he's intercutting the 2. But Wells liked to do those kind of experiments. And so unlike, say, the Johnny Carson show, which was shot every night kind of, off the cuff with some planning, Wells, he actually wrote the questions for the audience. I was there the day he was answering questions from the audience in his interstitial scenes between episodes. He wrote his commentary. He made a lot of fascinating comments about the importance of film crews, and he talked about acting in films and other fascinating topics. He wrote the questions for the audience. He would say to somebody, you asked me this, blah, 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 and then he'd direct the person. He'd even give them a line reading, which is kind of taboo for a director, and he did that a lot with me on the other side of the wind. He would say, it's terrible for a director to give an actor a line reading, and then he'd give me a line reading. But I was grateful because I was a non-actor, and he liked to work with a variety of, great pros and some non-actors and some semi-actors. And I was grateful he gave me line readings because I didn't know how to read some of the lines. But it makes the show, the TV show, seem very kind of staged and artificial in some ways.
It does. I absolutely agree. Between the obvious placements of the camera on the audience member asking the question, you don't see the interaction of the audience member maybe raising their hand. It does feel very edited, and between that and the different versions of film being used, some of it really kind of takes me out of the moment. And it's probably a lot to do with the fact that my entire life, the talk show format has been the same, and you have certain expectations when you turn on and see, Jay Leno or Johnny Carson. They have a show that's pretty laid out, and you know how it's going to be every night, but this different take on the talk show format, it's off-putting because it's not what I'm familiar with. It doesn't mean it's bad or wrong.
Yeah.
It's just it's a different take and something you're not expecting.
Yeah, and everything Wells did was a different take, something you weren't expecting. Sometimes it worked better than others, and I don't think this worked as well as other things because it seems a bit phony. And also they sweetened it, is a word I learned from TV, where they add on laughter and stuff. And
yes,
I mean, you kind of have to do that sometimes with shows because they're filmed in bits, but Wells filmed this whole thing in bits, and they laugh uproariously at all kinds of things he says that aren't terribly funny.
Yes.
And but he's got a lot of film buffs were there. Joe Dante, the director, and my friend Mark Goldblatt, who's a film editor, and various people. I was just an extra sitting in the bleachers and watching it, and I wrote about it for Film Comment. But these other people got to ask questions. But the Orson Welles show was just kind of too strange. And also the problem was it took so long to edit the film. He edited like a feature film, and Stanley Sheff said the opening 90 seconds of the Orson Welles show had over 20 versions. The 7-minute Muppet segment took over a month, 8-hour days, 6 days a week to edit with numerous reshoots. And you can't just do that for TV. I mean, certainly not for a weekly show. That would be impossible.
That was going to be my question, is what was he trying to accomplish with the Orson Welles show? Was he trying to be the next Johnny Carson? Did he see this as becoming a nightly or weekly program, or maybe like a semi-annual thing where he just had special guests on that fit his particular taste? Do you know what his goal was?
Well, I don't think he was totally clear about that. He offered it to the networks, and CBS replied, and they turned it down. But, I think the networks didn't know what to make of it, which is a typical response from studios or networks to Wells. But if he had done it, say, 3 times a year, 4 times a year, it would have worked out. He could have, worked on the editing, but I think they were nervous about how long it took to edit it. That's a natural response, and it's just not a format that would have fit Wells's style. But it was an experiment. I guess the best way to look at the film is an experiment that is unusual, and he does some magic tricks with Angie Dickinson and Roger Hill, and the magic show, Orson Welles' magic show, kind of overlaps with that. The Muppets he really enjoyed, and he does a skit with the Muppets, which is entertaining. And Welles was in the movie, I think it was called The Muppet Show, where he played a spoof of Lord Lou Grade, who was a TV impresario, and Welles interacted with the Muppets, and he kind of fell in love with them. He liked what is called sort of lowbrow entertainment, such as magic and vaudeville and circuses and things like that. And then he liked highbrow entertainment or highbrow filmmaking, and he didn't like middlebrow filmmaking, which is the kind of stuff that wins Academy Awards, kind of things with a kind of pretentious social message, but are not very...
maybe disingenuous?
Not very experimental, but, they have some kind of message to give, like To Kill a Mockingbird or something. That's what wins Oscars. But Welles didn't like middlebrow. He once said, too, that artists are greatest in their youth and old age, and he said middle age, like the middle class, is the enemy of art and society, And but he liked the lowbrow kind of stuff, and when you listen to his radio shows, he's wonderful at doing lowbrow comedy. Very, very wonderfully done with Jack Benny and various people. The
Munich Film Museum has a lot that you can go see, whether it's unreleased films or, in this case, cuts of Burt Reynolds, the interview. And you said you've seen a lot, if not all of that. I was just curious because I think one thing that the show does is something that almost any talk show does with Burt Reynolds, and that makes him look very charming. I'm sure he was very, very charming guy. I really enjoyed the interview. Of what was cut and that you've seen, is there anything that you would have left in, and if so, what would that look like, you think?
Well, I interviewed Burt Reynolds myself for Film Comment with Brooks Riley, and Reynolds was a really good interviewee, and very charming, and like he is on film, a complex fellow. He's an intelligent guy, and the interview that he cut down to, 30 minutes or something on the Orson Welles show is really interesting because they're both actors and a director. And so they were talking a lot about acting and filmmaking, and it's an intelligent conversation. And, when I was a kid, I started watching TV in 1951. My dad was film and radio and TV critic for the Milwaukee Journal, and so we had a TV before most people did. And back then, TV was for intellectuals, upper middle class people, because it was expensive. It wasn't until 1953 that, TVs got cheap enough that most people got them, and then they started dumbing down the medium. But Welles was a tremendous person a really eloquent person as a conversationalist. He reminded me of Dr. Samuel Johnson. He was not a good host, though, because I think he talked too much. He hosted The Tonight Show a few times.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he would talk over people, and he would ramble on, and when you're an interviewer, as I learned, I've interviewed many people. You don't try to overshadow the person who's talking. You try to get them to open up and expand on things, and then you kind of redirect them when needed. But Welles would monopolize the discussions too much, and that's not what you want to hear on a talk show. But the stuff I saw at the Munich Museum, I went there once to. I've gone there a number of times, but I went there to give a talk on Welles and The Other Side of the Wind, and Stefan Drossler and I did that. And then he said, okay, now we have a special treat for the audience. We're going to show some of the uncut outtakes from the Reynolds interview. And he showed hours of it. I don't remember. It seemed like 4 or 5 hours to me. And it was so wonderful. It was great. And but my eyes were hurting because, I have trouble watching things for that length. My eyes get worn out. So I was literally sitting there holding my eyes open to watch this stuff. I loved it, but it was just great stuff. I don't remember specifically what was cut, but variety shows have kind of they were very popular when I was a kid, and then they're not popular anymore. But the reason the Orson Welles show was made, Welles was friends with Greg Garrison, who was Dean Martin's producer, and Greg Garrison, Welles had helped put him through college. He was a young guy who was a protege of Welles, and Welles helped support him through college. And so he brought Welles back to America to be on the Dean Martin show repeatedly, and that's part of what lured Welles back to America. And Greg Garrison turned out to be the executor of Welles' estate. He cared about him that deeply and trusted him that deeply. So, and then they want to put the Orson Welles show, talk show pilot on the disc or streaming.
Well, I hope that comes to fruition. And thank you for regaling me with all. I mean, not only were you someone who was there, but you were someone who obviously knew Orson Welles and have an unbelievable amount of knowledge about him, and for telling us a lot about not only him, but specifically the Orson Welles show. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Going forward, though, we had spoke earlier about a couple of recent books that you've released, and with the amount of work that you've already produced, I can't imagine you're slowing down. Do you have any upcoming projects that you're able to speak about, or are you taking some kind of well-deserved time off?
Well, I did take a little time off, but I'm a compulsive writer, is my father's phrase for me, compulsive writer. I've been writing books since 1963. When I was a teenager, I did a book on baseball called High and Inside, which came out later. And so I'm working on some ideas, but I did, in the interim, put together this new version of John Ford, the critical study, the late Michael Wilmington, who died died earlier this year in January. We did that in 69 to 71, and it was a time when Ford was out of fashion, partly because of the Vietnam War and his association with John Wayne, et cetera. But he's to me, he's my favorite filmmaker. He's the world's greatest filmmaker. And so we did a kind of a groundbreaking critical study, which holds up very well. And University Press of Kentucky has recently announced it. It'll be out in December of 2023. And I did another book on Ford called Searching for John Ford, a biography, which took a long time. I've been studying him for more than 50 years now. And John F. Kennedy, I've done 2 books on his assassination, Into the Nightmare, My Search for the Killers of President John F. Kennedy and Officer J.D. Tippit, and Political Truth, the Media and the Assassination of President Kennedy. I'm very proud of those 2 books. And
that's the new one. The second one's the new one, correct?
Yeah, I put a lot of work into that over the years, from the 90s onward. And, we live in such a divided country because half the public believes one version of reality and half the other. And people don't trust the government anymore, and people don't trust media for good reasons, to some extent. But it's become a very dangerous situation, and I trace it back to the Kennedy assassination, how the media and the government lied to us, and the New York Times and the Washington Post in particular have been lying about it since it happened. And so it's a book that I'm very proud of, and I'm very happy about it. And then I did this Coen Brothers book. I'm glad to hear you're a big Coen Brothers fan too, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love Spielberg. I just wrote a piece on the Fabelmans for Slate. You can look up online. I need to update my Spielberg biography when I get time. I will. I've done 3 editions of it. And but the Coen Brothers are my other favorite contemporary directors because somehow they managed to make very personal, quirky films like Wells or Kubrick, within the system. And they get them released, and they do rather well, most of them. And critics are divided on them, which is one reason I wrote the book, because I think they're misunderstood. I'm answering the criticisms and trying to define who they are. And it's a short book. I always wanted to write a short book because I've written these very long books. They get longer and longer as I get older. The first books I wrote, Wells and Ford, were relatively short. But when you get older, you see more nuances and complexities and things. But I wanted to go back and write a short book, and I had fun doing that, and it's been very well reviewed, and I'm very pleased by the Holder and Human Comedy.
Well, that's tremendous. A lot of work you've already done, new stuff that recently came out and stuff on the horizon. I always say I've adopted a phrase in the past couple of years. I believe it's a French phrase, but it translates to two deaths. And as it relates to Orson Welles and all of his work and how you say he's still got more and more coming out even as we speak. You pass away in your mortal self, and then I think you have a second death when someone says your name for the last time. And I don't think we're done speaking Orson Welles' name for a very long time. So I think he's going to live for a very long time. And people like you keep his spirit and his work alive, and I appreciate that, and I genuinely appreciate the time you've given me today to speak with you about your work and the work of Orson Welles.
Well, thank you so much for letting me talk about him. And yeah, I've often said that Welles' career is not finished. It's, I wonder if he did this on purpose. Partly, he left us a lot of work to keep working on for years. In some ways, he wished he had finished Other Side of the Wind, but it gives us an opportunity to keep kind of collaborating with him and keep putting out his work. And there's so much bounteous work that still hasn't been released. His career is far from over, and so that's one of my preoccupations as a film historian. And I think I'll do another book on Welles when I'm 90 years old. I'll call it Orson Welles: The Last Word. You can't help writing about him because there'll be more Welles films in the future.
It sounds like they keep coming. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, Joseph. Thank you so much, and take care. I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, what a great,
You aced
great,
it again,
great
man.
American interview. Joseph McBride is truly going on the Couch Pilots Wall of Fame. And I tell you what, that guy, he's written over 20 books. He's a film critic and historian. You heard all about it in the interview. What an incredible career this guy is. 75 years young.
Hello.
And still working. I mean, he's a professor. What an interesting guy. I really am glad I got to speak with him. Thank you, Joseph.
I hope he doesn't
listen to the show?
critique our show.
Okay. That too. Yeah,
You think he'll write a book about it?
Yeah, I do think that.
All right.
Let's put 10 minutes on the clock. We've never actually done that. And we'll break down a type of pilot we've never had before.
Yeah, this is
And
definitely different.
It's really a rarity. This is something we've never encountered.
Encountered?
I got to stop drinking Christmas ale.
Yeah, let's just finish that one you got there, buddy, and be done with it.
It starts right away with a question from an audience member about the medium of TV, which Orson seems to be all in on. Obviously, grew up in radio, grew up in film, but he's kind of an older guy at this point, and he's accepting of a new medium of television.
Right. Yeah, and he's basically on these shows, like there's an opening shot at least. It's just him, and there's people all around him. It's very close. It's very dark.
This is in the round.
Dark. This is
Yes.
very dark.
The lighting is weird in the show from soup to nuts. It is, like we mentioned in Interesting Facts, though, shot in the round.
Sure.
He's pretty much in the center, and I bet these people are 3 feet away from him at most.
Right.
And otherwise completely surrounded by people. There's a spotlight on him. Everything else is dark, and he's talking to the camera, essentially.
Yeah, and he's kind of talking about who's going to be on the show, and and he's very theatrical, right? I mean, is that a way to put it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That
All right.
word is in my notes multiple times. He says, we're going to have the Muppets on. We're going to do some magic with Angie Dickinson. Right now, I'm going to cut it over to myself, essentially, opening up for Burt Reynolds, which is a cool get.
Sure. Oh, yeah, and yeah, for sure. And but then this is what's weird about it is, he introduces Burt Reynolds. He comes out, and the backdrop is different. There's not people all the way around him anymore.
It's more of a traditional stage.
And there's big, huge, humongous pictures of Burt Reynolds, very close up. But there's also one, like when the camera's facing Burt Reynolds, you can see Burt Reynolds in the background. But when it's Orson Welles, you can see a very young picture of Orson Welles, very large and blown up, which I thought was like...
Oh, I missed that.
I was like, well, that's kind of taking the stage away from Burt, you know what I mean?
Well, I tell you what, I'm watching this, and instantly, you kind of hinted at it already, but Orson Welles feels larger than life in his presentation. Very theatrical. Lines...
Very poetic.
The lines that he's saying, well, it speaks to the poetic, because his lines feel very calculated, very pre-written.
Sure.
This is not off the cuff. He doesn't seem easygoing. He seems like his...
He's not doing Carson here.
Right. I don't think that his theatrical approach to this translates well to a talk show format. I don't know that it translates to any other format than live theater because he's very it's very dramatic the way he speaks.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's bad. It's just it's off-putting to see that in a talk show format when that format has been so clearly laid out even as far back as 1979.
Right, for sure. Bert comes out and he has a red shirt on with that big old butterfly collar. What do we call it?
Maybe that's it's a long sleeve red shirt with the collar, the big fat collar.
Yeah, and of course all the chest hair.
Hell yeah.
And a blue blazer,
dark blue.
We look over and Orson Welles has the same basic shirt on, red, and the same color blazer.
I would love to know what that's about because that is not an accident. You know what? Everything about this is so calculated. This had to. They're wearing the exact same thing.
Right.
They're wearing the exact same.
Right.
This is
and
not. They play it off like a coincidence. It is not a coincidence.
Yeah, and
I want to know what that's about.
And they start taking questions from the audience, and that's the first question. Is like,
yeah, it is the first.
You
question.
know, it's like, hey, do you guys realize how that if you're so meticulous and planning of everything,
right?
How did this happen?
I don't remember what the answer was, but it was not satisfactory to me.
No, it was not satisfactory at all. Bert is in straight up Bert mode, right? He is.
Oh, absolutely.
Don Juan Marcos. You know what I mean? He's cool. He's a cool cat. Gets all the chicks and just suave and debonair. And and so they a lot of the audience members. You said it was pre-scripted the questions, but
yeah.
But we're going to hey what's the difference between your public life and your private life? How are you different? And most of these questions in the first segment of the show are legitimate questions that if I was in the audience I would ask this person. And it goes on for probably 20 minutes and then they cut to commercial, but then when he comes back on for the second part of this, Orson obviously wants to plug him, Bert being a director now. Mm-hmm. And that's when I felt like the questions got weird.
Well, I will say they were a little weird before that. So the camera shots on the audience members, like if you have an audience, you basically you have a straight line of stands, and you would have a camera just kind of panning over to someone who maybe raised their hand. You don't see anyone raise their hands. You don't see anyone go over with a camera or a microphone to hand them a thing. It's a big mic on a boom.
Right.
And it's very clearly calculated. And when the camera is on someone asking the questions,
there's a spotlight on it.
It's that, and it's pretty squared up with the person.
Yeah. It's
not like this weird angle because they weren't prepared for this exact person's location. These people are prepared camera-wise with where they are.
Right.
It's very interesting. I want to say something else about the camera is very instantly and perfectly framed to the person asking the question. Orson is trying to shoot the talk show like a film, I think, is what he's doing.
Right.
He's trying to really edit this thing down and make it look like a film, and I don't think that's what the American television audience is used to seeing.
Oh, for sure not. I think that's why this is. As you're watching it, you become kind of unsettled by it. You can't really.
It takes you out of it.
You can't submerge yourself in it.
Absolutely. Sure. Some of the audience questions, I do think, before he starts talking about the directing thing, are a little too inside baseball for common audience members. Because one asks about his first screen test. I don't think people usually talk like that. They talk about his public relation firms. If these are questions that Orson pre-wrote, then why not ask him himself?
Right.
Are these are they? It's just,
why are you having the audience ask the questions?
If the questions are not going to be like normal talk show fodder, then did they feel like these types of questions had to come from the studio audience?
I think they were making it like, even Common Joe can ask Burt Reynolds questions.
I guess.
What's the difference between a star and a superstar? And I was just like,
it's kind of a dumb question,
and it starts to get pretentious. The longer this interview goes, in my opinion, it gets more and more pretentious, except for when that little chubby girl gets to go up on stage and kiss Burt Reynolds.
That's definitely in my notes. I think Burt Reynolds is the only genuine part of this. I think, unless he's the greatest actor of all time, which I don't think he is, I think he's good. Burt Reynolds is very charming, and I feel like that his responses are pretty off the cuff and genuine.
It just seemed like they were so laid back. Like, yeah, Bert, you're cool. You're the smooth guy. Mm-hmm. But it seems like, I'm melting into this chair.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's kind of really sinking into it. A lady does ask to be kissed by him, and he says, "Yeah." She comes up,
hell yeah!
And they really smooch it. They really.
It was a long period.
He really gives it to her. But that has to be for show. Like this has to be that's got to be pre-written, right?
Yeah, to promote his his sex symbol.
There's a guy who asks a question who looks like Gallagher, and he's got a shirt on that says "World's Biggest Hamburger."
Yeah.
I like that guy.
Yeah, I like that shirt.
That guy fucks.
He does a lot of fucking.
Bert's charming and funny throughout the whole interview, and Orson really takes a back seat for the first segment. He doesn't say a whole lot. You get a lot of like sparse interjections, and you get bizarre cuts of him reacting, which I think were filmed later. You get some really bizarre things where you're seeing only Bert in a shot or only Orson in a shot, and Orson sometimes is reacting, and it doesn't feel like it's happening in real time. It's very bizarre.
And Burt Reynolds mentions Cary Grant a million times in this.
It's fairly clear that he holds him in high regard for his acting prowess, and maybe even how he was as a man, because they hint heavily that he was a pretty big ladies' man as well, and that's definitely Bert's image as well.
Sure, and like I said, they talk, they do all these, and then they go to commercial, and they come back, and this is what I was saying earlier. Is Orson's like, well, not only is he a wonderful actor, superstar, some would say, but now he is also a seasoned director, and this is in this next segment. It solely goes upon directing, and it becomes kind of snobbish in that, like, if you just imagine
it's a version of like Inside the Actor's Studio.
Yeah.
Remember that show?
Yeah.
Towards the end of this segment, we get for this program anywhere a pretty rare wide shot of the two on the same stage at the same time, and Orson's true size is revealed. He is a massive fat guy at this point in his life.
Yeah, and he is also by this shot you can see he's sitting right like on the edge of this chair. Like he is so big that he can't like sit back in this chair. And he's smoking a cigar the whole time.
All I can think about is like his, like when you see a big fat guy, he's got the same skeleton as you or I. I'm just thinking about this weird skeleton, this mass around it, this huge fat fucking mass that this guy has. He's really sitting in that chair. They continue their conversation about folks that work behind the scenes and their importance. More bizarre rambling and monologuing by Orson that is clearly edited in later. Like he's trying to bridge conversations with these, these long-winded, like 2-3 minute diatribes.
Diatribes.
It doesn't. Anyway, they also, while he's giving these diatribes, they cut to Bert a couple times, and it's very clear that that's not his reaction to what he's saying at that point.
Right.
It's a really cobbled together odd.
It is for sure. So Bert's got to go, obviously, and so now we see Orson walking around. Talking to the audience.
Mm-hmm. He's narrating kind of,
and he's standing by a camera, film camera.
More odd lighting here.
Yeah, odd lighting all throughout this, and he's like, well, he does some little jokes. Then he talks about a magic, coming soon, some magic and everything. Mm-hmm. But first, here we have he goes in this very detailed, creative way of just introducing the Muppets.
He describes each Muppet with a few adjectives. When he's talking about Kermit, Fozzie, Miss Piggy, and then Sam the Eagle. But Miss Piggy didn't show up.
She never even showed up.
Unless it was edited out.
No.
The Muppets are on stage, and you clearly see their performers operate them in the
shoulder.
shadows.
You see like the shoulder of it.
And it's a thinly veiled attempt to hide them, and I've never seen the Muppets like that before. Like, about 10 years ago, the Muppets popped up on Saturday Night Live, maybe even longer than that. And they've been a fixture on the show, maybe since the first episode, honestly. And they would pop up every few years. And at the end of the show, when they're saying the good nights, they would have the actors who are controlling the puppets. But during the show, while they were active, you never see the performance.
Yeah,
it was very weird to see that.
I found it super odd, too.
Very odd.
And and so it's Fozzie and Kermit and the blue guy, which I guess is Sam.
Sam the Eagle, I think is his name. Yeah.
And, they're basically, this looks edited together. They're talking, of course, Fozzie Bear, who is probably one of the best comedians.
He's the greatest.
He really is. He really is.
He's the GOAT.
He's the GOAT.
He's the felt GOAT.
There's Michael Jordan in basketball, and there's Fozzie Bear in
basketball.
Comedy.
Sorry.
I don't know, just the cheap Fozzie Bear jokes, and then all of a sudden Gonzo's on there as like the cue card holder, and
all the words are misspelled, and he's holding them
They're
backwards
sticking
and
to
upside
him,
down, and
it just seems very like it doesn't work smoothly at all.
it doesn't give the Muppets their due.
No.
This is not a proper representation of how good the Muppets actually are.
Right.
Anyway,
I think it's definitely held back.
We get a commercial break. Gonzo and then Animal introduce the Orson Welles Magic Theater. Orson comes out and presents, kind of in the same vein as your Mama Lynn, the legend of the Mummy's Curse.
Right. And I guess I didn't know that Orson was an avid magician.
He was a fixture at the Magic Castle.
Was he really?
Yes, he was.
Okay, so he was really in it, but I didn't know that about
Sure.
him. And basically, it's the girl in the box, cut her in half, kind of standing up thing.
We see the action on the stage. Orson's narrating it.
He's narrating it. It's just, yes.
It's a performance of two people putting a third person into a sealed box. They put large flat metal blades into the box. He tries to be meta a little bit, I think, by saying that it's all an illusion. Then he opens the box, and he's moving the blades, and he closes the box again. They open it again.
And there's nothing there.
In the middle, they got 3 sections going vertically. That middle section where you think a person's torso would be, you could see all the way through to the people in the back walking around and throwing flames through it.
Right. Throwing flames through it. It was a hot one.
The box is closed. The blades are removed. The person emerges from the box, a lifeless corpse. No, actually, she came out alive.
Yeah, he mentions like when they're doing the whole middle thing where her torso disappears. Talk about grave robbers. He was describing those.
The guys that came out in the flames. I think he's trying to tell a story, but I was not really. I was kind of checked out on the story. I just want to see the trick, Now we get a full shot of the Muppets with Orson on stage. We see Jim Henson and Frank Oz with their hands up the asses of Kermit and Fozzie. Orson gives another long-winded theatrical intro, but I will say that I really do love this segment because when I was young, I had a fascination with the Muppets, and honestly, specifically Jim Henson. If my mom were here, she would say, when Jim Henson died and you were a little boy, it really bothered you.
No, and I thought to myself as I was watching this, I said self because that's how I refer to myself. I mean, this is the interview that I wanted to hear. Like, this is definitely.
I agree.
I want more of Mr. Oz because I never met him before. I never knew much about him.
That is exactly my note. Is there are a lot of interviews with Jim Henson.
It's all
but
Henson.
You don't see it. Frank Oz. I think he directed like When Harry Met Sally. Right. I think he's the voice of Yoda. He is unbelievably prolific with his work. You never hear an interview with him.
He directed that wonderful, wonderful HBO series Oz about the prison.
That was all based on him and his experiences. That's working with Jim.
And there was so much. There was so much information. Like I was like, "Oh, you asked Burt Reynolds all these fucking meta questions, and you're just
we don't get hardly any time with these guys.
Any time with these guys.
I was really excited about. We don't get a lot of time with. I did note that Frank Oz's speaking voice is very similar to the ones that he's famous for.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's pretty similar for Jim, I would say too. They talk about how they protect the integrity of the Muppets, and they don't make them cutesy.
Right.
Jim talks about not playing with puppets when he was small, and it blows Orson's mind. I don't know if you remember that. He hears Jim say that he did not play with puppets when he's little. Orson Welles looks over to Frank Oz, and he says, Frank? he can't believe it. Frank, how about you? Did you have he could not understand it.
Jim Henson's like, well, I was like, I got out of high school and like I wanted to be on this television. And
so that's how he got in.
Yeah,
and then he went over to Europe and really got into puppets there. And anyway,
that's the only place you can get into puppets.
It's the best place to do it.
I mean, not without getting arrested.
Orson monologues even more, but looking directly into the camera, feels edited in, done later. It's off-putting.
More weird lighting.
It takes me out of the interview process when he does stuff like that, and we really get very little time with Jim and Frank, which is disappointing. Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot more left on the cutting room floor. I would love to see what that looks like. We go back from a commercial break. Orson changes into his Chinese costume, which he says. And he's talking to the camera, and he's showing a clip on a monitor of something recently shot, something about a high-end restaurant.
He's basically like describing, hey, we shot this last week.
He's really going into a lot of detail about it.
Yeah, and it kind of confuses you because you're like,
absolutely it does.
Just play this and let me watch it.
He loves to monologue.
Oh, he likes to hear himself talk.
One guy's there, he says he put a playing card from his collection at home into an envelope, sealed it, put it into a safe. And then we took it to the restaurant. And
even before this, they show a guy getting his head blown off.
But it's like it's
not real. But I mean,
they're showing someone firing at a dummy and exploding the head.
Hey, don't call him a dummy. He's an actor.
I'm sorry, my mistake. He's a working man. He's probably a trade union guy. it's all in an attempt just to be, I think, dramatic and build up the suspense of what we're about to see. But the words Russian roulette are said several times, and we all know what that is.
Yeah, I was like, watching this. I was like, really? I was like, we're gonna go. I was like, oh,
pretty dark.
It must be some kind of like spit, like a joke off of it or something.
Fan of the Deer Hunter? No, it's
no.
We were really dealing with a revolver here. He then transitions to a peace film. He says 5 days beforehand with Angie Dickinson at a restaurant, the high-end restaurant that he was talking about. Angie and Orson, they're sitting at a table. Large plastic semi-translucent boxes put on the table. Orson flips a deck of cards into that cube and asks Angie
to do all these manipulations.
To move the cards around, pick them up, flip them over, throw in the air, and then
smack it up, flip it, rub it down.
More static acts. You're a big fan of that group. This appears to be a magic trick that Orson is putting on and continues to monologue as a magician would during the act of the trick itself. He reaches down for the envelope that we previously mentioned, and he opens it up, and it contains the Jack of Diamonds.
He actually says during this, stroke them tenderly. He's very seductive toward the end of this. It was off-putting. I was like, this is a perverted old man.
She picks up the big translucent box, and we see that all the cards that she had been messing with, all of them are face down except one.
Jack of Diamonds.
The Jack of Yawning, that's right. And she's impressed. She's impressed by it. We go back to the studio, and he says Angie passed the test, so they're going to bring her into the studio now. And what we're going to do is work with real bullets.
Yeah, and he goes into all the narration of how these bullets are certified. This gun is certified by this committee. And, I mean, he makes it out as like, hey,
we see
fake.
the committee.
Yeah.
They have jewelers' loops out.
They got a committee to get me off the block because I say my rhymes loud and I say them nonstop.
They're using a 6-shooter revolver. 5 of the casings are empty, but 1 has a real bullet in it, he says. Orson will be the subject of this Russian roulette. He emerges into a hallway from some curtain wearing a robe that he says was worn by a Chinese magician named Chung Ling Soo, who died doing a similar trick in 1918, and he shows us the bullet hole in the robe, and all I can think of is there's no way there's a Chinaman that was ever as big as Orson Welles was, that this thing would fit him, especially back in 1918.
Yeah, and come to find out the guy wasn't even a Chinaman. He was an American guy with some normal name.
As he continues to tell this story that I can't really
It's long
follow
and drawn out. It's drawn out. It's long. It's theatrical. He gets into this chair.
Yeah.
They strap him down and blindfold him, and then Angie Dickinson comes out with a gun in her hand,
like a fucking crack shot,
and she's got a smile on her face the whole fucking time.
She's standing maybe 10, 15 feet from him, and he says, she's pointing the gun right at me. You'll see to her left there's a target. A normal target, like it's got a solid background, and then you got the light bulb there. And I will instruct her to fire the gun at me, and then when I believe the bullet that is actually a bullet, not a blank casing, is up next, I will tell her to switch to the other target.
Right.
So he says fire. She shoots at him,
and then
blank.
Instantly she moves forward and closer to him.
And which makes me think, like, if I'm Angie Dickinson and I don't know anything about what's about to happen,
I'd be scared to death.
I
wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it at all.
I don't know to step forward.
Right.
You know, there are things that are happening that are clearly predetermined or pre-written. Sure. She fires like 3 shots, and he yells, "Move!" She shoots at the target.
He yells at her.
Yeah, and she fires, and the bullet comes out. She blows up a tiny light bulb. That's what I'm saying. Like, Angie Dickinson, is she really a crack shot, or is all this bullshit? Right. I would imagine it's bullshit.
Come on.
Anyway, as soon as she shoots that, it's clear that the light bulb breaks. She goes back to him, shoots the final blank shot at him. The crowd loves it. And Angie Dickinson's got this big fucking gun in her hand, and she's waving it in the air and smiling at the audience.
And earlier we missed it, but there was some shit talking about Truman Capote, and then there was this wraps it up and goes back
he comes out to say goodnight here.
Yeah, and he says something about, earlier when the person said something about Truman Capote saying actors were stupid. Well, he's stupid, basically, is what he said.
He comes out to say goodnight. And
he had some beef with...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He comes out to say goodnight, and he says, well, we do a show that's X amount of time, and now they're telling me I have 60 more seconds. I'm like, that's not how a show is. This is all pre-written. The fact that you're coming out and saying, I don't know, it just it feels.
Yeah, the last
it
time
felt so disingenuous, and it takes me out of the show.
Right, and they're like, they say, we have 19 seconds. Well, I'm going to read you this poem called Jenny, and the poem is like, I don't know, a minute and a half long.
Hey, Jenny, I wish I would have lost your number.
That's what I told my first ex-wife.
That's the end of that.
Please remain seated as we are now crossing a zone of turbulence.
Ends with a poem. Turbulence. This is the part of the show where we say, hey, other people have seen the Orson Welles show. What do they have to say? Well, I'll tell you what Orson Welles himself had to say about him. He said, he admitted with hindsight, it was frankly an attempt to enter the commercial field and earn my living as a talk show host. It was just a flop, that's all. Nobody wanted it.
Well,
those are his own words.
Well, at least he's grounded in some form.
He's able to take a step back and look at it for what it was, apparently.
That step back is... Whew.
What would you do to improve this?
I wouldn't be so meta about it. I wouldn't be so... It just seems so kind of pompous. I guess I'm not looking for the right... I'm not getting the right adjectives. It just seemed... When people tune in, when they see Burt Reynolds, they want to have a good time. They want to, see him, and they don't want to get all deep with him. You know what I mean? And we don't have to spend 30 minutes with Burt Reynolds and then 5 minutes with the Muppets. You know what I mean? I was like, you space it out better. You give everybody equal time. So that would be part of it for me. And it was just so dark. It was, not dark. Like, yes, it was morbid dark
because the guy was being shot at. In the
second half of it, but it was just the visually it was dark as well, and it didn't seem like who's going to watch this on a regular basis.
Here's my take on it.
I feel like you need a martini. And a cigar.
Get loosened up a little.
And be at a strip club to watch this, like a dark corner of a strip club.
This took months to make. And I think there's a ton of stuff that did not make it to air. A ton of stuff left on the cutting room floor. I imagine Orson Welles is probably not unlike who's that? Frank Lloyd Wright. You know Frank Lloyd Wright, famous architect.
Yes.
He's got a house half credited to him right here in the Peoria area. And earlier this year, last year rather, I went down to Springfield and I visited one of his homes. Very interesting. Frank Lloyd Wright would not claim a house unless every aspect of it was designed by him. And I'm talking about furniture inside. I'm talking about light fixtures. Everything was designed by him. I imagine Orson Welles is probably pretty similar to that.
Sure.
I bet he's kind of a control
meticulous
freak. I bet he puts out a really good product sometimes.
That's not what his wife said.
Well, that's neither here nor there. Pretty funny joke, though. If this talk show that lasts 70 minutes took months to make, and then we flipped the channel over to Johnny Carson, and I think in the 70s he was doing an hour and a half show,
right.
But in the 80s and 90s towards the end it was like an hour. That doesn't work.
Right.
Financially, to make a show and have it take months, and they said it was a low budget, but still, that adds up. I think what this is, you can't make this show 4 or 5 days a week.
No.
It's impossible the way Orson Welles would want to do it. Orson Welles. I think what you would have here is you take a legendary filmmaker like him, and you give him a special 3-4 times a year where for 2 hours he talks to the people that he wants to talk to. Maybe he showcases a band or a magic trick or a stand-up comedian or maybe a part of an act of a play. It can be a long-form interview show / variety show.
4 times a year. I like that.
It's not going to be once a week. Right. It's not going to be 4 or 5 times a week. It can't be that.
Right.
If this were to go forward, because I think there are some interesting aspects to this, but it doesn't play like a typical talk show. It's more aligned with those, 1990s Barbara Walters specials where she'd talk to her favorite people.
Here's what I went. Hello, I am Barbara Walters. Welcome to Walter Talk.
Welcome
to Barbara Walters.
Welcome.
We have with us tonight. This sounds like the girl from Blazing Saddles. Oh, whoa! How romantic.
I haven't seen that. I've only seen Black Bart, the failed pilot. Hey, any more ideas for what you do with this? Yeah, I don't have any other ideas, too.
Don't do fucking magic tricks. Leave that to the guy from How I Met Your Mother.
You can do magic.
You can do anything you please.
All right. Final Descent. We are not the only people to have seen the Orson Welles shows. Other people have rated it. Other people have reviewed it. IMDb is a real website. I could never make up something like that. It stands for Internet Movie Database. That is Christmas ale. Hey, people from around the world have rated the Orson Welles show on a scale of 1 to 10 decimal points in play. Blake, what do you think people have rated the Orson Welles show?
Oh, there's got to be a bunch of film nerds out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say a 7.1.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
From 78 ratings. Great job. Really, really incredible work there, Blake.
Thank you.
Critic reviews. All right, that's enough of that. Come on. Critic reviews. Spine numbered from Make Mine Criteria on June 16th, 2013 says, as usual, for many of Welles' later attempts at TVs, reviews are mixed. While the Orson Welles Show is often credited for appearing slick, professional, and even superior in look to other shows, the episode is often thought of as lacking spontaneity.
That's true.
A cardinal sin for a talk show, which is my beef with it.
Yeah.
More specifically, the program, particularly Welles and the pre-written audience questions, is considered too rehearsed and ladenly profound. Viewer reviews. Too intelligent to be a flop. This is from January 19th, 2015, almost exactly 8 years ago. This is 8 out of 10 stars. The Orson Welles shows had no shortage of brilliance. Few people on the stage fill the screen and the shoes like a host better than the host did in this endeavor. It would be hard to imagine Welles doing one of these shows once a week, let alone every weeknight, because of the amount of energy that comes off the screen. The personality Welles had was perfect for a variety show, but sadly, he had a limited window for displaying it. He may have been known more as a director than anything else, but the man knew how to deliver lines. He came through on this on his vision to put something together that would engage and entertain a television audience, but the fact that this obscure gem is all but lost to history seems to prove that I am alone.
You are alone.
Yeah. 5 out of 5 stars. This is from Brendan Michaels. This could have been the greatest show of all time. 1.5 out of 5 stars. Mark Kaiserman says this show has the strangest directorial choices in any talk show ever. Most notably, the camera seems to be allergic to the wide shot. Everyone is shot in close-up, so there's no sense of stage or connection between Orson and his guests. Knowing Orson Welles' penchant for fakery, who knows if they were even next to each other? We know that for a fact sometimes they were not.
Yeah. Do you think Orson Welles was just pretentious, or do you think he was just, I don't know, he was so good at his craft as a director he couldn't move it to...
I think he was a fine auteur. He loved film.
Automobile?
He loved the craft.
He loved the screen.
And I think he tried to apply what he knew from making films in the 40s,
right,
and radio from the 30s. I think
tried to put it
he tried to apply it in different ways. He was open-minded to try different mediums.
Could you just imagine how crappy one of his, like if he directed a porn? I would
just a lot of shots of the guy's face. Yeah, I've seen that before.
I don't want to see that.
Cinematic.
I want to see his dick.
I want to see that big dick. Hey, Cinematic Magician, 3.5 stars out of 5. He says, too caught in between its need to be straightforward talk show and its dissection on the artificiality of the format to ever have gotten picked up. It's a fascinating experiment just the same, if more interesting than watchable at times. One more here real quick. This is from Tempest Fugit, for a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I want to find the dimension where this show got picked up and became a hit. Enjoy the Joe Dante cameo. Joe Dante is a...
that was the guy that had put the card in the...
Oh, it might have been.
Yeah, he put the card in.
You know Joe Dante?
No.
Okay.
I just remember that's the only other person that was on the show.
Fair enough.
Or was Joe Dante one of the committee members?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to FCF Airport.
Quiet down, lady.
Joe Dante directed Gremlins and some other kind of schlocky B-movie stuff.
Someday we should break down a B movie.
Yeah, or at least play a commercial for the idea of. Hey, it's time to rate the show. You and I have done a lot of work.
Sure.
You mainly about information related to the Orson Welles Show. Now it's time for us to regurgitate some sort of rating to how we feel about it. It's based on the television show from the 1990s. Excuse me, I'm sorry for sneezing.
Sorry.
It's the show affectionately and accurately known as Wings. We look at all the characters. 1 is the worst score you can get, and that's the character known as Roy Biggins. Number 7 from Wings is the best score you can get. Number 7, Brian Hackett. Captain Philip, rest assured, I turn towards you. How do you rate the Orson Welles Show?
I don't know. I have been known to score harshly. But I'm going to give this a 3. I understand his relevance in the film world. I understand he was trying to do a different medium than he was used to. I'll give it a 3.
Give it a 3. Yeah. I feel you.
Give it more Muppets though. Fozzie, he just couldn't he couldn't get his timing in that one.
You turn on like a Jimmy Fallon. He's still on TV today. That's a tight ship, man. They know what they're doing. They know the beats of that show. They know the structure of that show. From the time they start recording to the time it's over, I bet it's not more than 70 minutes, and the show is an hour long.
Right.
You know, they got it down to a science. They're not editing a lot out. They know how long for each segment. They're in and out.
Bada bing, bada boom.
You cannot do that with this type of show. If you cannot, I don't even know that you can label yourself a talk show. This really isn't even
a variety hour.
Someone mentioned a variety show. It is more of that.
Yeah.
And if you label it that, people's expectations change of what that means or what it'll look like, and it more aligns with what we saw here.
Yeah, for sure.
This is a guy, an old guy at this point, who's taken what he learned from the 40s and 50s and applying it to the late 70s talk show era. God bless him for trying. God bless him for still wanting to be active and in the game. This doesn't work as a talk show. It's not a talk show. It's something else. I don't mind long-form stuff. I like that. Really get into the mind. Burt Reynolds, like I said, super charming guy. Fun to watch. His appearances on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson are legendary. He's a good guest to have on here. But the way it's edited, the lack of spontaneity, just have an audience there. If Orson's got questions, let Orson ask them.
Right.
Let's see those guys in the same shot. I don't want to look over and see Orson reacting to something that's not happening, or it felt weird.
Right.
Something about this felt weird. There is something here really cool to see a legend attempt something like this.
Sure.
I'm going to mirror your score. I'm going to give it a 3 as well.
Hand-holding club.
And with the score of a 3 and 3, we shall close the book on the Orson Welles Show, and we'll never mention that one again.
Ever.
But join us next time, won't you please, when we watch the pilot episode of Here to Stay. Here's a little something to wet your whistle. When yuppie Susan and her husband Peter get in over their heads financially, they reluctantly look to Susan's unpredictable liberal father for help taking care of their daughter. You can find the entire episode of Here to Stay by subscribing to Couch Pilots and SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app of choice, and then simply click on one of our classically blue links in our show notes, or go to YouTube. Blake?
You know what to do, Tube. Good job.
I'm breathing like Orson Welles over here.
I know, right?
Jesus Christ.
Here, have another cheeseburger and a cigar. Or
Thank you.
Or just put a period in, or a comma in one.
Can't eat a period. Well.
Oh.
Well. Yeah, I guess you can. I don't know. How much Louis C.K. do you listen to? I don't know.
How chunky are you willing to take?
Hey, go to couchpilotspodcast.com. All of our past episodes are there. And I'll tell you what, if you go there today and today only, all of our future episodes are there. Every one we haven't done yet, it's on
there.
the site. Check
it's
it out
there,
today.
For sure.
You can send us an email at couchpilotspodcast@gmail.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. I'm active on Twitter. You can get a hold of me. I'll respond to you. You can give me your address, and I'll send you a nice Whitman sampler.
Whitman?
Yeah.
Whitman?
Whitman's is a chocolate piece, a little piece of chocolate.
I know what it is.
You want to get a piece of milk chocolate?
I love chocolate.
Don't give us a call. We never react at our phone number, so we have no voicemails. We are not on Instagram. Do not go there. We don't do that. Patreon is still real. You can give us some of your money, and we'll take it. Here's the thing.
Money.
Anytime I leave my house and I'm like, I need a good or a service, I always use money.
Oh, yeah.
So give me some of that, and I'll be able to pay those things that I do with the money that you gave to me.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I like that.
Awesome idea. Well, we're in our 38th year of doing this. Season 38. And you have honored me with giving me a little bit of time on each show to kind of talk stuff out.
I do love and honor you.
And last week, we announced CouchCon 2023.
Yeah, and you said this season, at the end of every episode, you're going to give a little bit of information out.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So last week, we discussed that Olympic Stadium in South Korea, 100,000 people capacity.
You know what? For my money, the best Korea.
I like all the Koreas.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. You want to hear a side
I would
note?
love it. If it's about Korea, you can sign me up.
It's adjacent.
Korea adjacent?
Korea adjacent. So on Christmas Day, there about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I got hungry, and I was like, oh, there's no place open. Everything, it's Christmas Day. McDonald's, Arby's, everybody's closed.
Right.
Well, Chinese restaurants aren't. I go in there.
They don't care about our God.
No. I go in there, I said, I want an order of beef wontons
Right.
and chicken and white rice.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of chicken? And I pointed at some chicken.
Chickadee China, right?
Chinese chicken. I wait 20 minutes in line. I get in my car, I open it up, and I have chicken nuggets, a container of white rice, and my beef wontons.
Were you happy with that?
No, I wanted some kind of chicken that mixed with the white rice.
Oh, see, I feel like that's exactly what you would want.
No,
just regular
no.
chicken nuggets and white rice, and that's perfect for you.
No. Anyway, okay, so we announced that Olympic Stadium in South Korea was where we're going to, and the event will be opened by a band. I mean, we've had
buddy.
Kiss before.
Yeah.
That
We had Get the Lead Out, do the pre-show.
Yep. But this year,
Mm-hmm.
and this was a hard get, opening the event, the band is Max Sabbath. It's going to be the opening band.
I've seen them live before.
Yeah, and that's how I got their email. You gave me their email address, and I talked.
They're
to them.
great.
Yeah, it's got to be.
They take a
I love
strong
Black Sabbath, and I love McDonald's.
They take a strong stance on modern capitalism, and follow them on Twitter if you want to get riled up.
Really. Yeah. So,
tell people at home what Max Sabbath is.
well, Max Sabbath is a Black Sabbath cover band that dress up in characters from McDonald's.
That's right.
And
They changed the lyrics though
oh yeah,
to McDonald's related. Like I'll be goddamned if there aren't 5 songs about milkshakes.
brings all the boys to the yard, and that's what we're hoping this year at Olympic Stadium.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great way to start the show. I mean, how do you that's the thing is you have 100,000 people, right? How do you get everybody's attention at once? I mean, we could come out on stage.
Clown.
We could come out on stage and just
Streak.
start talking.
Get our dicks out.
And yeah, and everybody's but how do you get everybody amped up for a 24-hour festival?
Grimace.
Are you happy with the booking?
The hamburger. Hell yeah.
I mean,
I'm happy with
because
it.
I mean, you do so much for the show already.
I do a lot for the show.
And I was like, well, maybe I should do all the booking for, CouchCon, and I'm kind of worried that you're not happy with it.
No,
already.
you're doing a great job. I know you need that validation. But listen to this. One time I saw a triple bill on a live show.
Okay.
Max Sabbath. Metalachi. You ever hear that? You ever hear tell of Metalachi?
No, heavy metal mariachi.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
It's the most easy portmanteau to figure out. Natalie portmanteau. And then finally, I saw a band called Oakley Dokley. Have you heard of this?
No.
This is a band, 4 or 5 gentlemen, heavy metal outfit, and they all dress exactly like Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. And they do some pretty funny stuff. And at the end of the show, the lead singer strips all his clothes off, and underneath he's wearing a skin-tight ski outfit, not unlike the one that Flanders is wearing in one episode. And it says, "Feels like I'm wearing nothing at all. Nothing at all.
That's a pretty good
Nothing at all.
impression.
Nothing at all." That's Harry Shearer. I talked to him for an hour on the phone. That's how I did it. But yeah, it's that was a great lineup of just kind of fun, funny, hardcore heavy metal music. Max Sabbath, Metalachi, and then of course Oakley Dokley.
That's cool.
Great show.
Yeah. So I mean, more to come. I've got 8 more bombs to drop on you, so to speak.
And we'll say right now, tickets are available. Like we're talking right now. Each week, as you reveal more information,
The cost goes up.
ticket price goes up a little bit.
That's what they do with Muddy Roots now.
That's what they do everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Chillicothe's,
Each time you announce an artist, it goes up after that.
I don't want to piss anyone off or anything, but like Blake's got this on lockdown. You're not going to be disappointed.
Right. No. Yeah.
Get that discount right now. If you want, get the VIP access. It's a little extra, obviously.
Sure.
But you're not going to be sorry. And Blake's going to reveal the rest of the season some of the tremendous things going on at CouchCon.
Well, I appreciate your trust, my friend.
I appreciate you. I love and honor you.
I already got your plane ticket.
Thank you very much. I can't wait to go to Seoul. Is that how you say it? Seoul?
No.
Seoul?
Yeah.
Seoul.
Soul.
South Korea.
Sister, soul sister. We both ran.
Hey, this pilot may have been rough, but it's always a smooth flight here on Couch Pilots. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Namaste. Nah, I'm going to leave.